Hey everyone, welcome to Dialog Choices podcast number I've lost track. We're off to
Okay.
It was a longer pause than I meant to make. I just left
That's,
dead. I just left it dead. Andrew's back from Europe.
I am.
And
I'm
we're here
back.
with Illusory Wall from
Hello.
Dark Souls Esoterica fame.
Hey, how's it going?
And Colonel does not still have COVID, but he's still recovering from COVID, so he can't really speak through a podcast. So we're still in our wild
right.
card episodes.
We're 20 or what? We're 75% of the way there. We're just missing one person somehow. Always.
Yeah. We can, but this gives us an opportunity to go into some of a reoccurring topic, which is just From Software games in general on this podcast, is Dark Souls and Elden Ring and so on, because especially a lot of Elden Ring, because for a while there we were all playing it for like 6 months straight because Let's Players do everything as slowly as possible because of the schedule.
Yeah.
And then just venting and just dealing with the bizarreness of that game and our wildly different experiences with it all the way through and all that. And now I've got someone that is like, what if the Dark Souls wiki gained sentience and started making YouTube videos and became an influencer?
Yeah, I'd say that sounds about right. I have to admit though, I've actually only done one what I would call normal playthrough of Elden Ring. I haven't even found enough time to because I just played through it once, and then after that it was just firing up the game with like cheat engine and just like jumping
that's
around.
actually the thing I was wondering, is that because of the way that you make videos about these kinds of things, I was wondering whether or not you even did a normal playthrough of Elden Ring where you just like sat down and experienced it as regular gamer for like a few dozen hours and beat game, and then actually like, and if you then like went back and then, okay, now I'm gonna make content about this.
Yeah, so I did, but the funny part is I had already started my first video before I'd even finished the game. So that was like the video on fall damage that I made. So I just kind of like, even though I was like hacking around and like testing weird stuff in the game, I just made a point to like, oh, don't go to end game locations, even though I'm like jumping around in the game and not playing normally. But even my first playthrough was like very much, I'm calling it a normal playthrough, but it would not be a normal playthrough by most people's standards, because I was doing weird stuff where I was just like invading people over and over and like logging the amount of souls they drop, because that'll tell you what their level is. So I was like using that to help like build up a list of like, oh, what's the invasion level range? So even in a normal playthrough, I'm just doing weird side quests of just like trying to figure out how some stuff works.
The fall damage stuff was really interesting too. I got through that, I think last week or something. It was funny being kind of jump scared by it randomly. And I don't know if you saw, it was in Shammy's video on Elden Ring, like just to reference the idea of like it was kind of a joke where it was hard to tell if she actually watched the video specifically, but just dealing about, it was like a joke about the esoterica of Elden Ring and just being like, look, this is a game where it takes half an hour to calculate fall damage, so what do you want from me?
That's funny. I actually hadn't seen that, but that's exactly right. Yeah, it comes from what makes it so weird and unintuitive is the fact that I feel like they didn't create a fall damage system from scratch. They basically just like copy and pasted their system from Dark Souls 1. But then they're like, well, it's an open world game where there's a lot more vertical exploration, so like let's just like change what the numbers are. Kind of, and it's just like, it's really unintuitive because they basically just slightly altered an older system they have that from the ground up probably isn't the best fit for the game actually.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where I sat down to learn about something in Elden Ring because it was so noticeably strange in the context of Elden Ring, but I ended up learning about the entire franchise because I didn't know how fall damage ever worked on any level, really. Here, I found the time code for just for future reference of it coming up in the other video. But like I had no idea that there was this weird non-linear relationship, and it would explain why I've always been confused just in general about falling in the entire series. Which like this is like it's one of the From Software quirks. They insist on having some kind of strange like platforming section at least once that's like very very deliberately, here's the platforming bit. Like it's all the way back in Demon Souls, you'd remember like the mines have you either have the part where you take the more obvious you You take the more obvious path forward, where you get to that giant cliff overlooking all of the weird lava centipedes and stuff, or millipedes things, and there's a very tempting ledge that looks like you might be able to like find a way down without going into the bizarre series of caves that lead there. But that entire ledge is covered in Vaseline, and just you cannot predict what your character's going to do for the next 3 seconds if you try to do platforming there. But then the other path in that level is also just this vertical mine shaft. In fact, that whole level's kind of full of platforming, and like we just finished like I had to go find the secret Hunter's Dream area in Bloodborne, and that involved doing an alternate secret side path in the insane platforming section of Bloodborne, where you have to drop down through this weird dark area that's just scaffolding and long drops. But like it's always been this I guess it speaks to the need for something like those stones, which I just never actually use in context. But like it's just known universally that no one actually knows what to expect from a fall. And counterintuitively, there's often items that reduce fall damage, but they don't make falls safer. They only reduce fall damage within the narrow window where you only take damage, but they don't make you survive longer falls.
Yeah, right. Like it makes a fall safer if your health was like already really drained before you're dropping, which is like, why would you, like, who's not going to heal before like stepping off a fairly large drop? So yeah, like those things like never do anything to help you.
Yeah, and like it's always hard to gauge longer distances in general, but then there's like this, it's interesting learning out this weird aspect where like intuitively you would think, oh, fall damage would be either linear, because like you just, the further you fall the more damage you take, starting from 1 damage and ending at infinity damage, or it'd be like exponential, because like we learned that in real life gravity has acceleration, so the fact that every millisecond you fall is worse than the previous millisecond of falling, and so on. It's like it is an acceleration and would get worse. So it's not that surprising that you would accelerate at taking damage. But if I remember correctly, isn't there like there's essentially like a minimum fall damage and a maximum fall damage that are not 0 or 100, and so they just kind of like,
yes, that's what makes it so unintuitive in Elden Ring. Like, you know, you fall off a ledge and like you don't lose any health, then you fall like a little bit further and just like a much bigger chunk comes off because there's like no in between. And the same thing for lethal falls, where it's like you have half of your health after a fall, so you're like, oh, I was pretty good, I could have fallen quite a bit further. It's like, no, you were 1 centimeter away from dying if you lost that much health. Like
so like every player is going to intuitively try to look at their meter and how much damage they take and be like, okay, half of my health is gone, I fell half as far as you can fall. And that's 100% not true, because it's a meter where if you're using it as a reference, the entire first half of the first part of the meter is just entirely cut off and has 0 data, and the left and the maximum of the meter is offset to the right by like an inch from where it looks like it is. So it's just, everyone was just scratching their head, and you had like the perfect thing to make a video about, because no one could tell what was happening.
No one knows what the hell's going on with that. Yeah, it's super unintuitive. Like my whole video, like my clickbaitish thumbnail was saying like it's not, like glitched or it's not inconsistent. I think I said something to that effect. Because there's just a lot of people wondering what's going on with it. But like that is not me saying that it's a good system by any means. It works consistently. It's just like it is not intuitive. And I mean, the other half of the equation is the fact that it removes like 1% of your health when you land. It's like you would think leveling up your health more would help in some way. Like, oh, I'm gonna have more health for this, and it's like, no. If you were to fire up the game with like Cheat Engine and make your max HP like 10, just like a really small, impossibly small number, and fall off like a pretty huge cliff, like you're just going to lose like 5 HP from that same fall. That would remove like 500 if you had a lot more health. It's just like, it's so confusing.
It's I would say it's probably accurate to say that like your bread and butter has definitely been Dark Souls 1 specifically over the years. And I don't think that's because of just the sheer popularity of the game, although that probably helps a bit, but it's just like that game is baffling.
It's bonkers.
Like the more you look at it, the weirder it gets, and it's like staring it's like staring at a comic page and just noticing that the closer you look, all of the lines don't line up with the print of the color, and like more and more strange elements just don't make sense, almost as they're daring you to look closer.
They like, I feel like coming to Dark Souls 1 from Demon Souls, they had to have thought to themselves like, hey, like what else can we do? So they like really brainstormed on just like a lot of weird ideas, and like a lot of them aren't implemented very well. But they're super creative though, you know, whether it's like the miracle resonance mechanic that didn't really work, or just like the system for getting humanity from killing enough enemies in a level, like that mostly works, but it has some weird glitches that screws it up in a few places, and it's just like it's packed with so many weird ideas that, more so than any other game in the series, like you just don't fundamentally understand why things are happening in the game. Like something might happen and you might be like, oh, was that an online thing? Like did another player doing something in their own game do this to me right now? That's something that's missing from a lot of the other Souls games. I mean, they have mysterious mechanics and stuff that isn't explained too well, but Dark Souls 1 just goes so far off the deep end with that. That's like, yeah, I could make a million videos about this game.
Yeah,
I wonder. I
Go
wonder
for
if
it.
there's some kind of like scope versus time issue. Like you would think that, yeah, there's probably a desire, right, to expand upon a very successful game, but like I wonder if it wasn't planned out as efficiently as it could have. So you had a lot of different ideas being worked on at a lot of different times, but none of them actually got the amount of like the right amount of time that they needed to flush it out. So it always worked, but it wasn't perfect, which is like a weird, like, I don't know, because like based on some of the levels are like that too. It almost feels like the game
Mhm.
like kind of had this like strong start, and then somewhere along the line something happened where either too much started being added or a lot of time was being taken away, and like they just started to have to figure out like what is the enough that we can do for certain features, like what is enough for, to consider it good. um
Oh
and
This
yeah,
yeah.
like so,
I mean, this to steal a Game Grumps joke, like the Dark Souls 100% feels like the idea of like this was a Sonic the Hedgehog joke originally, but it was like, wow, this game looks pretty promising. I can't wait to see what it looks like when it's finished. And then like this shipped yesterday. But if that game
Mhm.
turned out to be a massively influential and like, playable game in the end result, like it feels like Dark Souls had 1 billion ideas that were all just thrown in there in like this cocaine fueled bender of like, look at all this crazy stuff we can do and no one tells us what we can't do in our game. But then also they just very much did not finish the game either. And so it's a
yeah.
it's a bizarre stack of just these incredibly strange half implemented mechanics, some of which are genius and some of which are genuinely impenetrable to people who have played the game for a decade.
Yep.
And nobody knows
Yep.
how they work, and the developers of the remake can't make them work. And like, it's so fascinating. It's wild.
Yeah, so many glitches that did not get fixed for the remaster, and like, yeah, it's just it's exactly like you described it. Because I mean, when you look at how like unpolished late game areas are, and it's like, oh, but they took the time to make vagrants, and like, not only do they exist, but there's a whole like table of like items that you can drop to spawn the good vagrants, and how they like go through this metamorphosis to like the items turn into different things as you're creating a vagrant, and like, it's just so bizarre. It's like, why did someone spend time making this when they obviously had bigger fish to fry? But that's part of what makes the game so cool, because it's just so, again, with all the notoriety that they have for their difficulty, it's like, I can't stress enough that Dark Souls 1 is a very weird game. Like it is incredibly weird, and that's why
it's rare
endlessly
for a
fascinating.
game. It's rare for a game to be as interesting to talk about as like EVE Online or Dwarf Fortress, but also playable by humans.
Yes.
Which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
not the case in those ones. Like this is a dumb side thing, but it's just like I hit the front page of shitty Dark Souls with my tweet where I ranked the Souls games, and I think Dark Souls is the worst Dark Souls game, including Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring and Demon Souls. That Soulsborne list, that half makes sense. So like my ranking is Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, Elden Ring, Dark Souls, which is somewhat controversial, and I tweeted it out being incendiary for fun, but I ended up on the front page of a Dark Souls Reddit that flames people for stuff like this, and
That's hilarious.
they were nice enough to censor my name, I guess. But it's very obviously me because my persona's in the thumbnail, and the icon is still
That's
visibly
really
there,
funny.
and so on. But
It's
I
funny that
say
people
this,
like. Mhm.
which is, it's just that I say this, but these are all good games. Like,
Yes.
they're not even, the worst Dark Souls game is not even as bad as the worst Zelda, which is also a crazy list of games.
Mhm.
Like, but like Dark Souls 1 is just so fascinating to me because, yeah, like it's infinitely, it's, you can talk about Dark Souls 1 more than you can talk about any other game that they've made, arguably, because of how interesting and strange it is. But not a large number of those things just do not add up to a good, like, a lot of those things aren't actually bonuses to the act of playing the game, even though they do kind of add to a vague air of mystique. Like, vagrants are genius and bizarre and a cool thing to have in your game and probably should still be around. But then you have Dragon Butt Land,
Yeah,
which I can
exactly.
only call, and I can only call it that. Like, it will always be Dragon Butt Land, and it's there seemingly on purpose, and I can't explain its presence in what is always insisted to be like the best game of all time by so many people. And I'm like, please please play the second half of the game.
It's really funny too, because like with what you said about like, you know, there's so much you could talk about, but doesn't necessarily like lend itself towards improving the game or improving like how you interact with the game. Because my videos have definitely gotten a handful of comments being like, how does this help me? I'm like
they're looking up guides, like a walkthrough.
Yeah, if you're looking up guides, it's like, oh, my videos are very much the wrong videos. Like, I mean, you'll get some tips and you can learn some things that'll help you, I guess, but like that is definitely a very distant afterthought for my videos. Like, yeah, you don't watch my videos to quote unquote get good at the games. It's not by a long shot.
I just find it interesting because like I just like I got really disillusioned from game development because I went to college to try to get into games and then just hard switched for two reasons. One, like I just gave up on coding as a concept. I did not want to stick to that. But also every bit of news I heard, like the Rockstar Widows, for example, just made it seem like game development was a miserable like industry to work in. And so like there's like two things going on where it's like, yeah, like finishing a game is comically difficult and half of these things barely work. But also on the other end, like they're like, yeah, like employees are treated very poorly just across the board. And it's actually kind of coming out across the board. Even I don't know if you've seen like stuff that's reporting on like employee satisfaction at From Software is also like really low, and they have a huge turnover and so on. And as much as people want to like treat certain companies as if they're exceptions, like just the entire industry is just like the worst to these people in many cases, and that's within Japanese game development, which is often so secretive and tight-lipped about like how working conditions are and so on. But like for me, like there's like a certain level of revisionism that happens with Dark Souls, and I think to some extent I think it might be because like it is so fun to talk about, and you have all these Vati videos, and you have the Illusory Wall videos, and you have these like these deep breakdowns of all these strange elements that are fun to talk about, but we just kind of skip over the fact that like this game barely worked when it came out. It shipped like half broken, and then it got ported to PC way too quickly at 30 frames per second, 720p, and we've kind of just gotten used to it, like playing it on like other console ports and with like hack fixes to like revise it into a game that it never actually was made as originally, because of how like I say this because its stability at launch to me is somewhat indicative of the level of like polish and completeness that it had as far as like its levels and mechanics go. Like there's clearly a massive focus on the first half of the game, and then the second half of the game was seemingly made way faster, as if they just needed to like just sort of fill in. They like try to just really quickly fill in the rest of the blueprint as fast as possible. And so like each zone abandons the level design concepts of the game up to that point, and instead becomes mostly a straight shot that has like one gimmick that's supposed to like kind of like inform that zone and kind of give it its flavor. It's like, here's the lava level, here's the level where you can't see, here's the level where you can't see the platforms, and like they kind of like leaned on that in place of any sort of like level design polish. And each of those levels has like 2 enemies total, and then recycled bosses from earlier in the game as regular enemies, like really consistently. Like, here's the giant level that's only the crystal guy from the lake over and over again, but they're gold sometimes. And like, here's the level where there's one weird crawling dog man skeleton over and over again, and here's the level with the that's just the demons from the beginning of the game, but over and over and over again as regular enemies. Like, it's kind of appalling a little bit, mainly if you're specifically brought in. Like, it'll be really fascinating to see people's reactions to this game if they hear its entire reputation first, and aren't like we were all there day one and experiencing it warts and all the confusion the moment we started playing the game. But it'll be really interesting to see like the reputation continue to sprawl forever, and like Dark Souls is the reason that Death Stranding exists, and so on and so forth. And then people actually play the game and they just hit the brick wall of how utterly strange it is, like just bizarre. And I'm not on like a mission to dunk on Dark Souls. I just think that the state in which it came out and the reality of what it is versus its reputation is so fascinating. And because I just watched your video about Miracle Resonance, and how like because people, this is like a good counter a bit to the idea that because people like often want to like deify Miyazaki and treat every element of Dark Souls as if it's like incredibly intentional, and not like kind of like certain things are really intentional and really like the point of the game, and other things are like kind of slapdash like filler, and like, oh god, we have to ship this game. And like Miracle Resonance is such like a wild example of that. Like, this entire mechanic has just never worked for entire platforms. And that's just how it is.
Now that Prepare to Die edition is offline, like the PC version, I think Xbox 360 is like the only platform it works on correctly now, and that's like a very underpopulated platform to my understanding. So it's kind of like it's insane.
Like, I was watching your video, it was nostalgic, because like, and Dark Souls was the first game that Andrew and I played on our Let's Play channel all the way back in 2011, just one entire eternity ago, when all this mess got started. And we've never been, and it's never been rid of us since. But like, I have periodically replayed Dark Souls since then, and I have completely forgotten Miracle Resonance existed as a mechanic. Like, I see those white rings in your video, and I'm like, oh wow, not even playing Dark Souls reminds you of this mechanic anymore. What in the world?
It's super weird. They just like didn't. It was a train. I talked about it in the video, but for any of the listeners here who haven't seen the video, it was like a train wreck in slow motion too, because they announced the network test for Dark Souls Remastered. It's like, all right, the remaster is coming out. We're going to do this network tests. And when that came out, like, I made a thread on Reddit that like no one paid attention to, being like, hey man, if they don't like put the miracles into the network test that actually spawn resonance, like, we're not going to be able to test that network feature. We're not going to know if it's working correctly or not. And I was already very cautious because like I knew it didn't work on PlayStation 3 correctly that whole time. So it was like, moving forward into the remaster, is this even going to work correctly? The test to test network features isn't including this mechanic that's like already very suspect. And then of course the game launches and it doesn't work correctly, and it's like, oh my god.
And like, and these mechanics are so esoteric that like, we like, you were looking for examples of gravelording, and this is a very unique, very specific form of data gathering we were able to do, which is that you were asking about if we've ever encountered this, and I'm like, I would never be able to tell you if that ever popped up. It sounds vaguely familiar, but how would I even search my several playthroughs for that occurrence? But thank you, YouTube. I can keyword search my entire comment section of the entire channel and find people mentioning gravelording. And in fact, one of those was an example of like just the message just popping up for no reason of just like, well, not no
Exactly
reason,
what I
but
was looking for.
seemingly no reason of just like the Gravelord servant or disasters have been the disasters have disappeared because of the defeat of the Gravelord servant or something, and it just like it's noise. It's completely incomprehensible. It's
Sucks for that guy, I guess.
yeah, like you're playing a game and then a message just full of words you've never heard of comes up, and functionally nothing changed in your game.
Yep.
And you don't know what it even was meant to be. And it's because, and if I'm trying to remember now, because I watched that back when when it first came out, but like that, it doesn't do anything, right? If you're not in New Game Plus, so in fact.
Yeah,
like
it doesn't do anything. So the message is completely meaningless. Like, there's a couple layers of confusion to it because it says disasters are gone after the defeat of the Gravelord servant. So the wording is vague to start with. A lot of people interpreted that as a message that like you had to do something. Like they're reading like, oh, disasters will be gone. Like that's kind of what people thought it said.
It's
like,
it sounds like
it's telling
some
you it's
ring the
done.
two bells stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, like the message is telling you it's actually over now. But you
Which
see
is
that message in the first playthrough when it doesn't actually do anything. So it's just kind of like, I mean, the optional PvP exists in the first playthrough, but it's like, so it's just weird getting this message saying like, hey, disasters are gone. But actually, we just meant that there might have been a PvP sign somewhere in this level, but now it's not here anymore. Like, and we're going to tell you this.
Which is like useless information because the game's already full of PvP signs that just come and go endlessly.
Yep.
It's incredibly like it's. And I can only interpret it as just being like an incorrectly implemented feature because like the message just means nothing to the vast majority of people who will ever see it. Not only because they don't know what it means, but because it actually is not reporting a status change that is meaningful, or even is the thing that is described. So like they made a New Game Plus only mechanic, but then let it infect non-New Game Plus matches, which like kind of just makes it not work on any level because like yes, that gives you a little PvP thing that you have no reason to do, but like two things are happening here. Like one, you're just confusingly doing something completely nonsensical to every new game player that it infects. But also, assuming it's a one-to-one thing, I don't know if that's how it worked or not, but at least the people you're infecting being a new game means that you as the Gravelord servant are also not getting the mechanic that you're setting out to do either. So it just kind of doesn't work.
It was so unintuitive to the point that like people thought the Covenant was heavily glitched for a long time. Like if you were to read about Gravelording, even to this day, people were like, oh, don't mess with that. It's bugged. It's heavily glitched. And it's like, well, no, it actually does work consistently. It does have a few weird kind of glitches on the side that are very obscure, but not ones that affect whether or not like it quote unquote works. It definitely works. It's just designed horribly. You know, and it's so unintuitive to the point that it appears to be non-functional. It just sends mixed messages. Like that message definitely derailed the whole thing. I guess I should ask more broadly. So you played Demon Souls before Dark Souls 1?
Yes and no.
Oh, okay. How did that go? Did you like bounce off of it or something?
Yeah, no. You ever watched the Zero Punctuation review of Demon Souls?
Oh, it's been a long time. I'm pretty sure I have, but it's not fresh in my memory.
My exact arc. Like, you get into it just enough to get through Boletarian Palace 1-1, and you're like, okay, this is difficult, but I'm not getting through this. And then, like, Boletarian Palace 1-2 is designed to break you. Like, as a new player, it's funny because playing the game now, the Tower Knight is not a hard boss, and that level is 30 seconds long if you aren't like going through and getting all the items underneath the bridge. Like it's just dodging like 3 dragon fire spots that admittedly have very tight timings, at least they have like the game feel of having intensely tight, just distressing timings. Like I never trust my run through those areas. And worst of all, the last run does just run you face first into several enemies that you have like you're stuck between a lot of enemies that can very abruptly kill you and your back being covered in fire, and you have to figure out how to make those few seconds work or you're starting over. But as a new player that isn't used to like doing corpse runs where it's like, okay, I finished this level already, I'm just trying to beat the boss, and you're you develop the skill in the franchise of like running past entire levels that you've played before over and over again. Like, time to fight Sir before. Here's this weird gauntlet of random ninjas that I don't play, that I've already beaten before. I'm not doing it again. That whole approach. You just build different skills by playing the franchise more. That makes Boletarian Palace Part 2 more doable. And so, yeah, my first experience was that I completely fell off of Demon Souls while being interested in it. Like, I didn't really choose to quit. I just stopped playing for the day and then never picked it up again. And then I kind of fell off of Dark Souls also, in that I picked it up to play with Andrew for the channel, and we're just kind of like, we're doing one of the worst things you could do, because we're just hanging out and playing the game, and every time someone died, we'd swap controllers, which is a great way to learn a game, is to take turns. It's not very effective. And we had the worst possible introduction you could have had, which is that, and I think I've been vindicated again and again by hearing other people's accounts of this exact thing happening, but we did not find the undead Berg. So you can imagine how that went for us, because we found everything else instead. So, and this is a case where the reputation of Dark Souls works against it, in that it's all about like, this game's incredibly hard, right? It's so hard. So like, it's, if something kicks your ass, you're like, oh, this is the true Dark Souls experience begins here, like that whole thing. So like, we went to the catacombs, and it's just infinitely respawning skeletons that are like technically beatable. Like you could definitely drop them, but boy, is this a problem. What a spike in difficulty from the asylum. And then we eventually gave up and found a different route into the New Londo ruins. So now you've got another set of like differently unbeatable enemies. Like, but like, they do give you the little curse items. So like, for like a good hour or two, it felt doable. Like, oh, you just got to use this specific item and fight these ghosts in a specific way, and you can maybe get to this level. And like, now that I know where those levels go as an experienced player, I know how utterly doomed we were if we made any progress further than we did anyway. Like, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. Like, the checkpoints are so far away, and those levels are so long and difficult without the trick to defeat them.
I remember
But that was just the thing. Like, I think we eventually, like, we made it far enough that we beat the gargoyles by summoning, and we did beat the butterfly on our first try. And I was like, wow, we beat a Dark Souls boss on our first try. Wow. But we just never really fully beat it. And I actually played the entire game solo off camera while listening to podcasts, which is also not a great approach, because I can't hear the game. But that's how I used to consume video games like 13 years ago. But I eventually beat Dark Souls being a coward with a shield and a spear, like the lightning spear you get, I think, and like lightning charge, or I might have just made it lightning. Big heavy shield and spear is like the stereotypical way of getting through those things. And then I went back and beat Demon Souls in a different way, and eventually it all finally like clicked for me, so that I could go back and play the Dark Souls and the lead up into Dark Souls 2, and I was finally like gaining momentum and learning the games. But that was a long climb. It's just a case of like, if the game doesn't teach you how to play the game, then like, or what the best ways to approach the game, then like you can like learn a lot of really bad habits and not even know.
Yeah, there's so many things.
Yeah.
When Dark Souls 1 launched too, it was glitched so that when you locked onto an enemy, you couldn't like press left or right to like retarget. It like barely worked, at least like on launch day. And it was just like, there were so many frustrations baked into like the early console launch of Dark Souls 1 on top of all of that like there was jank. Like, I remember coming in as a fan of Demon Souls, and I would say Dark Souls 1, even with all the jank warts and all, like it's probably my favorite Souls game. But like, I remember my initial reaction coming from Demon Souls was like, oh, this is kind of rough. Like, I was like not, there were some moments where I was like, I don't know if I'm liking this as much as Demon Souls. Yeah, it's just a weird experience. But I got
I know Toaster had I think we need to get him on at some point to actually discuss this in detail. But Toaster has like a strong reaction to Dark Souls because he was a huge fan of Demon Souls and really
Okay.
clicked with it and and has a lot to say about about why it was so special and so on. And for him, Dark Souls was a huge letdown, and that is I definitely want to interrogate that. Yeah, like I want to interrogate that a bit because that's such a that's a very specific perspective that never comes up. In part because almost nobody played Demons. I mean, not almost no one. It was successful, but it did not light the world on fire the way Dark Souls did.
Yeah, no, I can extremely relate to that. I mean, for me, it's going to be watered down a lot because I did wind up loving Dark Souls by the time I was done with it. But there was a low point in my first playthrough. Like I said, like the lock-on was really glitchy, so it just felt janky compared to Demon Souls, which is really funny to say. And then there's a point in the unpatched version of the game, the fog ring made it so that anyone who's wearing it, you couldn't lock onto them. So it was ridiculous in PvP. You were like, anyone who's good at PvP has strategies for like not locking onto players or whatever. But when you're still like learning how to play the game, like, you need to be able to lock onto someone. So like I just remember getting like invaded in Sen's Fortress, and I couldn't lock onto the player because they were wearing the fog ring, and I got like totally demolished. And that was a low point for me where it was just kind of like, do I not like this game as much as Demon Souls? Like there was something very wrong at some point. But yeah, like Toaster though, I came in, I clicked with Demon Souls like right away, instantly. I'd never played a From Software game before that. Like I didn't know what a Kingsfield was. But I had a friend, I didn't have a PlayStation 3, so I had heard of the game, but like hadn't looked anything up. And I was like, I'm not gonna get a PS3, so like whatever. But a friend bounced off Demon Souls, but knew enough of my tastes. Like he was like, oh, you should come over and like try this game because I think you'd be into it. And I just like immediately, even though like I didn't know how to play, like there are a lot of aspects of the game, like I didn't parry like probably my entire first playthrough of the game.
I still can't. I can't do it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Certain enemies are a lot, like I'll have like setups for some enemies that like parrying like a Silver Knight or Black Knight, it's not a big deal to me, but like parrying hollows like can be pretty scary actually. But yeah, I don't know. It's just sort of this weird thing where like instantly in 1-1, like I remember just like falling into that pit near the beginning of the level, like the one above the executioner's area. And it just like the gears started turning in my head being like, oh, like what do I have to do like when I get back to this area to not die here? And like I was immediately on board for that experience.
Oh yeah, and the encounter design is so interesting throughout Boltarian Palace, like the first level. Like that's like one of the best levels they've made to this day in any Souls game. Is just the intro to Demon Souls in a way that like Dark Souls never really captures that. Dark Souls 2 and 3 don't really do that, I don't think. Like it's a very strong intro that I think they've never really gone back to on that level. And then Elden Ring, what first level?
Yeah, Elden Ring's the opposite of that.
Yeah, like my Elden Ring intro was that I immediately it's like I immediately found like my first episode ends with me fighting the giant. That's a boss fight in a cave by the lake. Like that's where I went first. Like I didn't meet the NPC in front of the starting point. I didn't get the grace because like, and like it seems obvious, like it's one of those things where it's like a Let's Player moment where like everybody watching the video sees this golden thing in front of me, and my camera seems to be pointing at it, so you would think that I see it, but I'm looking at the giant golden tree on the horizon, and this insane. I'm like getting weird like hiccup things. I'm looking at this insane like distant vista and like the sheer amount of stuff to take in, and then I immediately just do on instinct follow the wall to my left to check behind the building for secrets, but it's just more open world, and then I just went that way and never like got the first checkpoint or behaved in basic ways you'd expect a player to do.
I had a great introduction to Elden Ring because I had played the network test, which of course didn't have. There's that area, a Geel Lake or whatever, where you can go downstairs and you open up in the final game. There's that trap chest that takes you to Caelid. In the network test, I think that just gave you a weapon that might have given you the Reduvia or something like that. So I remember going in like firing up the game, like I'm gonna go right for that chest because I know it's near the start. Like that's gonna be the first thing I do is get that weapon. And it sent me straight to Caelid, and I was like, oh, this is scary.
Those are
My God.
fantastic surprises. The like when you get teleported to that distant view of like that vortex at the end of the game,
Yes.
and you can't interact with that level from there, but they just show it to you. Like they just periodically show you previews of later levels, like how you teleport into that bridge with the giants on it in the middle of the city, and you're like, I have no idea where I am, but it does two things. It previews a future area, but it also does that moment of like it expands your map, because you think you know how big the world is, and then you get tricked into being in a different zone, and now there's just a tiny plip of map in the middle of nowhere, and now the map just scrolls that far, and you didn't know that was possible either. Although I did go almost the entire game without finding that one ridge that teleports you like 6 places. That was like one of the last places I found.
That's definitely a unique strength of Elden Ring out of the Souls games, where like moving forward, I don't think I want all of their games to be open world. I definitely prefer the more compact kind of maze-like construction without the open world. But that doesn't mean I didn't appreciate it in Elden Ring. You know, it's something that kind of switches up the pace and the vibe of the games, and yeah, that experience of just like winding up somewhere far away and realizing the map's a lot bigger. It's like, oh, okay, this is something that doesn't happen in the other Souls games. I remember when I first got warped to Caelid and like made it outside and saw what the landscape looked like outside with like that giant skull in the environment. I was like, holy shit, I just stepped into like a prog rock album cover.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, Elden Ring is really, really good at that particular experience, and that's something I love about it.
You can always, it's a little goofy, but you can always tell it feels like when a From Software game was running out of steam and just had to quickly finish a zone, because like Elden Ring has its own Dragon Butt Land. Like the ice level is just but like the least said about it the better, honestly. And it's like kind of the it's kind of like the cost of trying to go so hard in this particular thing, like because like the map just expanding and pulling that trick on you while it does so is so effective, but they committed to it so hard that there's just like there's entire zones that just like nobody really wants to go to and
no one wants to
again.
be. They're not happy while they're there, 100%.
And I don't think that level had a new enemy in it, like at all. I think it was exclusively things you've seen before, like the hands and the giants from earlier and so on.
Yeah,
so
that sounds right.
So once again, it feels like the demon ruins, where it's like we had a big area to fill out, so we recycled all the old enemies and made some of them bigger or something, or some of them smaller, and just kind of get through it. There's a boss at the end. It's lore important, because like finishing demon ruins is lore important, but the act of playing it is just kind of this slog.
Yeah, all of the Souls games have their low points of just like, I'm just playing through this to get through it. It's not somewhere I want to be.
But I absolutely agree. Like, it was a cool trick, but I definitely missed just the approach to level design that the rest of the series has always had. Like, I want to unpack these like little labyrinth levels and like feel the satisfaction of like one of my favorite things that the entire franchise has done is the way that Dark Souls 2 expanded Estus Flask upgrades into like heart pieces, and they had 2 separate categories. They had the ones that make them stronger and the ones that give you more of them, which was back in Elden Ring. And like having that be a reward for finding essentially every like secret nook and cool trick throughout the game was a cool exploration reward. But the idea of completionistly exploring the Elden Ring world is almost a mean thing to expect of anybody. And like the game kind of started off as being like when I played Breath of the Wild, I was so taken aback by how for the first time in years I was curious about an open world and was exploring and poking around and like solving these little puzzles and observing my environment and being rewarded for doing so, and having that be intentional things that were placed to like poke at like this legend, or this is actually a weird environmental observation that will lead you towards a shrine and so on. And like Elden Ring felt like that for 3 zones. like Caelid, the intro zone, and the lakes feel like that's back. But then you're like, oh, okay, here's my sixth dragon ambush. this was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen, but now it happens all the time. And like, or the death
Yeah.
bird again, and so on. And suddenly you're like, it just kind of like through repetition tramples its own surprises because they become just a checklist expectation of like, okay, this zone's going to have another dragon ambush and it's going to have a different elemental affinity. And that's just the theme this game has, which is a weird thing to do to your surprises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've only made 2 of them so far, but some of my more popular videos are like my geographical analysis of the game space. Like I did one called Lorgen's Layout for Dark Souls 1, and I did Looming Landmarks of Lothric or whatever for Dark Souls 3. And so like a lot of people are like, oh, are you gonna make one for Elden Ring? And like I'm not sure if like people are gonna be prepared for me to be a lot more negative in that video when I eventually make it. Because I love the landscapes, I love the aesthetic. Again, that feeling of knowing how much bigger the map actually is. But like for a deeper analysis, it's like, well, it's just an open world, so stuff you see in the distance, yeah, you can go there, but it doesn't have the same puzzle-like intrigue that Dark Souls 1 had, and even Dark Souls 3 to an extent. Like it's a lot more linear gameplay-wise than Dark Souls 1, but in terms of like how they made the levels fit together, they actually put like a lot of thought into that. Even without the interconnectivity, there was so much care put into the world's design. Like for Elden Ring, it's like a big flat open space, and my biggest criticism is that like you have these levels where like, you know, the legacy dungeons where within them the level design is fantastic, but there's never, how would I put this? Like anytime you go underground in Elden Ring, there's never any relationship to the above ground, like ever. Like if you're ever underground and you see like, oh, a skylight, like there's light coming in through the ceiling somewhere. It's like,
you're not going to find like a hole on the surface.
You're not going to find a hole anywhere. Yeah, like they never do that. So I mean, there's a few places where like there's that one dungeon somewhere where you can see the other dungeon from a distance while you're underground. And it's like it has like that Astal variant like across the ways that you can see. I forget the name of the dungeon. Is it like near the Perfumer's Grotto or something? I don't know. But so they had one spot in the game where you can see like an other dungeon that you're not actually in. I'm like, okay, that was awesome. There's also the sewers beneath Lundell where like it gives you an alternate entrance into what is one of those more standard dungeons, and it's like, oh, like that dungeon breaks out into a normal level. Like that was really, really cool. And if the game just like sprinkled more of that in, it would have made me happier. But it very much lacks doing stuff. There's only a couple examples of the game doing stuff like that, and that to me is kind of a letdown.
Even leads kind of heavy on this like the coffin. I'll connect levels.
Yeah,
like even underground, they're like very much like just separate maps that they kind of like gave you warps to connect to just kind of make it go somewhere.
Yeah.
And I say that like I liked a lot of the underground stuff, like the
the aesthetic. The first time I took that huge elevator down, like where am I going? Like that was so fucking cool.
Where
like,
almost everyone's first exposure was the river with the with that fantastic purple orange gradient to its coloring and everything, and just like it's a spectacular visual, but also like I also just like the that the first area is a bit more open and kind of aimless, but like I kind of preferred a lot of the underground stuff over the open world stuff because at least now you were playing a level, which you usually weren't. Like the peak is obviously playing some kind of castle. And like, there's like, okay, here's the 1 or 2 paths you can take, and here's the variety of like enemy encounters designed around you approaching it from a specific direction. So there's like an intent to it now. Whereas like random patrolling dudes in the fields just have zero direction to them, and it's just kind of a flat encounter you can choose or not choose to do. But the underground areas were like, here is the beginning of the level and here is the end of the level, and some of them might be a little more castle-y, and some of them might be a little bit more like the swamp areas of Demon's Souls, where it's just like, okay, there's a beginning and an end. Good luck with the middle. But at least it was like a series of levels that had a clear intent to how you're supposed to play them. And I don't mean like the correct way to play them. I just mean like there's like a progression, and you feel like you're playing. it's not the right way to put it, but it feels like you're playing a game instead of like sightseeing and wandering.
It's like I said, like I appreciated the open world in Elden Ring just because it was something new and different, but it is not the optimal form of a Souls game for me by any stretch. Like if they said like, hey,
Yeah.
moving forward, like we're gonna make all of these games open world games from now on, I'm gonna be a little like, oh, no, please don't. Like give me another Dark Souls 1, give me another quasi Metroidvania,
Yeah,
or even
I'm
like a
worried
Demon
about its
Souls,
success because of that.
Yeah, and again, I mean, if they want to branch off, if they have like a series that's open world, I'm cool with that. But I would definitely like side games. Give me a. I don't necessarily lore wise even need a sequel to Bloodborne, but just hypothetically, like a Bloodborne sequel that's not open world, like that sort of thing would be super welcome. Secturo.
Yeah, just put it in the
die
middle.
thrice.
Bring yeah, just bring back all of the aughts naming schemes for From Software games.
Oh God, why?
I think one of the most damning things for Elden Ring, which I think is a good game, I just think that it's mostly a novelty that is a step backwards as far as the franchise goes, as far as like how much I enjoy the games. I think one of the most damning things is that like when I played Breath of the Wild and I would be hit with a new clue or environmental puzzle to try to unpack about like, oh, something with these statues you can see in the desert and what's going on with that, I'd be all curious and intrigued, and I would put in the time to investigate and figure out what's going on, and like I'd want to like find out where this is going and what it might lead to and so on. And weirdly, the rewards were often not that good, and you'd think I'd feel burned by that, but just the act of discovery in that game was often rewarding in itself enough that I just had a great time just unpacking these weird clues and going on expeditions and checking out this chunk of the map and so on. I tried to go and do the paintings in Elden Ring.
I was just about to. Yeah, I knew you were.
I just didn't want to do it anymore. I got so frustrated and bored. Like, there's one that seems to be looking like under the archway bridge, like the arches of the bridge in the starting zone, at something like a tree. And I have put so much time into trying to figure out like the angle and so on, and it's just not fun. It's just not interesting to do that. And I'm like, and it's weird because you're like, you would think these are really specific these are really specific landmarks, like, oh, here's the giant bridge, here's the tree, like this should be a no-brainer. And it's like it's incredibly difficult to actually find these angles, and not especially fun to do. And it's just like it's just kind of a bummer by comparison.
It's more fun than the in-game puzzle, like mini quests or whatever you call them. Have you played the Elden Ring Geoguessr at all? Someone made a Geoguessr for Elden Ring. It's incredibly polished. It's like really well designed. It only includes like obviously like overworld type spaces, because with the verticality of like the legacy dungeons, like if you're in a basement somewhere, like I don't know how you would pinpoint that.
Is it a mod or is it online?
It's online. It's just a website. We should do it sometime. It's like really easy to do. Yeah. It's really funny.
I've never played Geoguessr before, actually.
Yeah, I've never played it. For any listeners who don't know, Geoguessr is just like an online it uses like Google Map data. It'll drop you off like Street View somewhere in the world, and there's different rules you can set, like are you allowed to wander from your starting space or not. But you basically just look at things in the environment and try to figure out where you are in the world. So like maybe if it's a foreign language, you could be like, oh, that looks Russian, I guess, and like maybe try to pinpoint in that way. But yeah, it's really funny. Someone made that for Elden Ring really fantastically. Like it'll drop you off somewhere. They took screenshots throughout the entire game. I have no idea how many thousands upon thousands of screenshots they took with like a 360 degree view. And they mapped it to a map, and you have to like pinpoint, like it'll tell you like, oh, you were like 100 meters from where you guessed, or like you're a couple meters away. And it's surprisingly, like some parts I played a few rounds, and like some of it I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be really good at this, I'm gonna nail this. I made those videos about like the map changes, I should be good at this. And then like there were other spots where it's like it was so confusing and I have no idea.
Oh yeah, no, I'm I'm looking at it right now, and I am struggling to place where it has put me. It's
tricky because it's
surprisingly hard.
You'll often use like the distant, like the mini tree, like the trees as guideposts. But sometimes that's easier said than done. It's not, you can spot the continent pretty quickly. There's usually no confusion there. But like,
yeah,
yeah, it's it can be pretty confusing.
Yeah, I'm in the starting zone, and one of the there's obviously a tree, but also one of the primary landmarks I can see is what feels so familiar, but then I remember, oh, these are everywhere, which is those semicircle ruins, like it's like the side of a coliseum sticking up like a curved, like a bridge essentially. uh it's like that, like a half of a cup essentially, like a rim. Those are everywhere in that zone. That is not helpful.
Yeah.
Like you'll like remember your favorite one essentially, but if you look at the map, there's like 300 of them.
It's funny too, because when I played, I like did really well my first round. You know, I set like five. I don't remember if I set like 5 rounds or 10 guesses or like whatever you can set it to. So I did like really well. So I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be great at this. And like every attempt I did after that, like I scored worse. And I was like, oh, I peaked on my first attempt. I guess I'm good now.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this. There's no way. Make guess. Let's find out my first answer. I am 1,300 meters away. All right.
Well then.
So
Congrats.
that's enough of Geoguessr. That was extremely wrong. But no, it's interesting because obviously it's not an entirely fair comparison because it is an open world, but it's a stark change from there's like two previous criticisms I've made about games in the past, which is like, one, in the hype side, this is gonna be hard, this is gonna sound so unrelated at first, but in the lead up to No Man's Sky's release, they were touting it as being an exploration based game, and it's supposed to have infinite locations and infinite worlds and infinite content, all procedurally generated. And I'm like, hang on a minute, these two things don't mean the same. Like these two concepts don't mesh, because what we think of as exploration in a video game is not just like vibes. It's not screensaver style, like, if I keep going in a direction, more stuff shows up forever, like equally beautiful and meaningless, like forever and ever and ever. Like, exploration usually means like, I found the secret warps in Super Mario World that go to this level, and oh my god, and here I am. And like, that's why people, and like on that level, like that's why people like a lot of the stuff in Dark Souls. I know, because every time I ever dare like Dark Souls 2 publicly, everyone reminds me of why Dark Souls 1 is better for this reason, for 1/3 of its duration. Shots fired. It's like Dark Souls doesn't do this as much as you remember. But like having, ignoring the interconnection in this part, like the actual explorable levels, which Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2 do just as much as Dark Souls 1. Like, in fact, Dark Souls 2, like that's specifically what I praised about its like heart piece style Estus Flask upgrades being a reward for that specific style of exploration. Elden Ring being this giant expansive world, it kind of just becomes a series of repeating assets and just kind of vibes based poking around, and every now and then a cool wolf man is howling up there with a funny Welsh human sounding voice doing a ah-woo noise, and you have to esoterically figure out how to meet him. But most of the time it is what's slightly damning here, which is that I pointed out that one landmark that feels like a landmark in that zone, which is that you see those like semicircle ruins that are like a coliseum broken and on their side. Looking at this Geoguessr map that is of a level of detail the game never gives you, that asset repeats like 40 times in this zone.
Yeah.
This zone is entirely that one asset repeating, copy pasted over and over again, sometimes mirrored, but with very little variation, and because they just kind of have to fill space. And like, on the level of like, and this is a little bit of praise of Dark Souls 1, because once again, I love that game. It's just, I think it's the worst one. Like I did this whole thing to try to, like, as a love letter to the game, I encouraged my audience to participate, which is that you just take a piece of paper and just try to draw the game. Like, and I don't mean like it's aesthetic, I don't mean like it's monsters, I mean like draw the map from memory.
Draw an aerial view of the map.
Like how well can you do that? And I did. It was very time consuming, so I gave it a rest. But I drew the entirety of Undead Asylum, Firelink Shrine, Upper Undead Burg, and all the way through to Undead Parish, to the gargoyles and to the blacksmith and all that. And like, and drew the little like tried to awkwardly with my Sharpie draw the multiple floors that lead to like here's the upstairs part of the parish, and here's the downstairs part that leads to the Titanite demon, and that whole just absolute mess. But like, and like there will be flaws there, but it's like a shockingly detailed map to draw from memory of a game world. And I think that there's a lot to be said about how like the quality of a game, or like how interesting its design is moment to moment, on like whether or not you can draw the entire like environment and so on. Like I think that, like, for example, the average person who has played Call of Duty Ghosts campaign will struggle to draw the level geometry of Call of Duty Ghosts. But the average person that's played Perfect Dark really remembers some real big chunks of Perfect Dark because of how important the level design and objectives are all to the experience. And I think it's an interesting test. It's like the Bechdel test, where it's like it's not inherently an answer in a vacuum. It's just a thing that you can ask about a thing and wonder what that means about it and whether or not that says something about it. And like, yeah, like people will likely be able to draw the map's shape of Elden Ring, especially since it looks like an item in the game
or something like
yeah. But they would like, I think people would really struggle to like in any significant detail explain the map of Elden Ring, and they're welcome to try. But like I think it's much more, I think a lot of it sticks in your memory so much less because huge swaths of it are just kind of filler. It's just fields and a topographic map, but not so much like a video game level.
Yeah. And I know we're ragging on the map quite a bit, but like I can't stress enough that like the first time I got to Lendel, I was just like, again, I was enjoying the open world just in the sense that it was a change of pace, something different for a Souls game. So I was enjoying like, okay, yeah, this is a different thing. Like once I was actually like deep into Lendel, I was like, oh, like this is fun because the environment is like great to explore. Like this is really cool. I wound up in a weird dungeony area, and that the aesthetic of that area feels very different than the above ground, and the way everything connects is interesting. And it's like like that's when a Souls game is firing on all cylinders to me.
Oh yeah, like the university is such a spike. You're like, oh, I'm kind of enjoying poking around this big lake zone and discovering strange things and wondering how I get on that one ledge that's clearly a level later, but I don't know how to get there, and it's driving me crazy. But then you get to the university and you're like, oh, this is a Souls level. Oh, look at us go.
Yes.
And then it calls into focus the difference between the difference between playing like From Software's take on Horizon Zero Dawn and From Software making a Dark Souls game, like the contrast I don't think is in its favor when it keeps reminding you.
Yeah, I mean, and to its credit, like, you know, the open world spaces, like if you pick some of the really openy areas in, I don't know, like the forest of Dark Souls 1 or like the Faron Swamp of Dark Souls 3, where those areas feel a little less cohesive. I mean, they have pockets of like intentional bottlenecks of difficulty, but where it feels a little open and less polished, it's kind of like Elden Ring has some open world stuff that feels like a more refined version of that. Like, you know, they didn't completely drop the ball with the open world stuff, but it's still just several steps in quality below the really intentionally designed areas. Like, it just doesn't compare.
Want to fight the tree sentinel again?
Right?
What if there was 3 in this
connection
zone
for a second there, but
no.
Okay. Yeah.
Were you trying to say something, Andrew? It's been a dense conversation.
No, it's I like it's interesting to listen to, but I do not have the I guess you could say like the passion behind the inner workings of the Souls series. I am very much, I play the game both with a sense of simplicity, but I also just deal with the game in that manner too. Like I don't really think beyond about why something exists in a Souls game, and more like, well, can I kill it? And if I can't, then I usually kind of ignore it. Like I'm not very good at doing people's quests in Souls games because there is no because there is no like system in place to punish me for not doing it. Like there's no notification or notice or timer or anything that like really lets me know that I need to be doing something, or that I have begun something. And because of that, like because it relies on you to remember this huge cast of people in a huge map,
it
I
was
often
it was
like,
unusually hard, like even by the
yeah,
standards
it's
of the
just
series.
yeah, I just kind of like I don't fucking know, man. I couldn't even tell you the name of most places in any Souls game. Like I don't know their names very much, but I do remember like all of the weapons I used. But like that's
They're
because
my favorite.
that's
This one's named Charlie.
yeah, it's because like that was my goal, right? My goal was like always to get a bigger stick to hit somebody with, and so eventually, like I found myself just like looking at a lot of sticks and going like, oh, that one's the biggest, and just that's it. And so like again, it's interesting to listen to like all of these little in-depth nooks and crannies of both its creation, like why it's made, or like its decisions on what it does with the player, but also like it's baffling to me that there is this like I didn't even think of the game enough to think about stuff like this, to think like does it matter if you fall off at a low life or not? Like I've never even questioned that thought. My first instinct was no, don't go near cliffs, and I just moved on from that thought and just it's
Just all
again
cliffs
like
as a concept.
yeah, like I like play the game like a caveman. I'm just wandering around and people keep going like, you are not allowed, and I just bonk them until they let me go, and I just keep running. And everybody's just kind of like, I don't know what he wants, but we can't stop him. It's like I because I don't even know. I don't even know what the plot of like Elden Ring is, for example. I don't know what's happening. I just keep walking and people
it's
are
very
like
difficult to do that. Like
but it's my fault too. Like I'm not engaging with it in any way. I'm not going out of my way to say like remember an NPC's sad tale. I remember like specific stuff, but I can't combine it because I didn't go out of my way to like do a lot of these quests which add a lot of depth and nuance to this world, which is the story usually. Like the world is usually the story of Souls games. And if you're not I feel like if you're not actively trying to prod that information out of the world, it really won't tell you. It has
Oh,
no interest or obligation to.
yeah, you'll have no idea what's going on. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so yeah, like it's not that I don't have anything to say. It's just I feel bad because I don't play the game like you guys do. I play it so far devoid of it, like almost I don't know, like almost as if I I didn't even do this intentionally. Like I just showed up and was like, oh, I need to get out of here, and I'm just like trying to do through it as fast as possible.
you're just haplessly colliding with this game's narrative and enemies and be like, I don't even want to be in this story. What's happening?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
I mean,
Maybe that's an
that's
accurate
very
role
much-
play of the protagonist.
that's very much how I interacted with Demon Souls. Because I didn't when I played that game, I didn't have any like I looked some stuff up on the wikis and I just assumed everyone already knew how everything worked in the game, and it was like, oh, I can look at that for a deeper dive sometimes, but I'm not thinking about the mechanics. I'm not really like caring about any of the details. But I loved the game. I was like, oh, this Demon Souls rules. Like I loved it, but I didn't really sweat the details whatsoever. Didn't really overthink the lore. And then Dark Souls came out, and I was started off playing it the same way, but then shortly, like early on in its lifespan, people would be like posting to the subreddit being like, hey, like what's the deal with this? How does this work? And then I would see like people give like 5 different answers and realize that like no one actually really knew what was going on. And like
Oh yeah.
that was the beginning of the end for me, where it was like, oh wait, can we get like concrete answers as to how the stuff works? And like that's where I got pulled into all of the shit I've been doing.
Very much confidently wrong the game.
Yeah. 100%.
That just makes it so much more scary to me. The idea that it's just I don't know, like listening to the idea of someone going like, I made a game and I don't even know why I made this feature in the game, and I'm like, what does that mean? How do you do that? How do you just accidentally do a thing? Like it's just I don't know. It's impressive.
I mean, the core mechanics of Dark Souls are consistent and straightforward. There's just incredibly esoteric elements that become legend. It's like to make it more relatable. It's like when people talk about like, I don't even, this is cases where I'm not enough in the fandom to even tell you if this stuff's real or legend or not, but like weird shit about like the van in Pokemon and like catching Mew or whatever, like incredibly strange esoteric things that seem that that you used to share. Used to share stories about this stuff at like the schoolyard because everyone was collectively playing this one franchise because it was so popular, but we were all kids and there weren't online resources about the stuff back then, so it was all like a mystery. And Dark Souls 1 in particular has such a series of like malformed, half completed ideas that are like some of them are really cool and impact the game, and some of them are just like interacted with by 0.1% of the players, and even they don't understand how they work fully because they're just kind of in there. Like some of them definitely feel like they were just kind of left in and when they might have been pulled by a different company. And so it recreates that kind of mystery, and I think some of it's intentional and some of it's maybe not, but
it's a mixed bag for sure. Yeah.
Like it gives you that weird old Pokemon feeling of like wondering like what the hell the secret is, like the legend of Mew and what goes on there and so on. Because I don't even remember if those legends in Pokemon were intentional or if it was just kids like just spreading creepypasta style stories about their games all the time because that's just what they like to do. Although maybe it was kind of intentional because like famously the pilot of Pokemon opens with like a next generation Pokemon that's just never explained at the time. You just see Ho-Oh and they're like, oh, what? And then no one knows what that is for a while. But it's
wow, it's a bird. That's cool. I wonder if I can catch it.
It's definitely very much an element you can use intentionally for games, and I think definitely Dark Souls tries to do at least some of that because it is interesting just wondering what a game's quirks are and what its unanswered questions are, and there's an entire industry of mining exactly this about like Five Nights at Freddy's, like the question of like, is this intentional storytelling? Is it a weird joke Easter egg? Is this all seeding stuff for franchise entry 5000's payoff, or is it just Matt Pat making up fan fiction and then selling it to people? Like, well, who knows? But it's wild. It's very fun to talk about, though.
On the subject of playground video game rumors, I distinctly remember I heard the dumbest thing ever when I was in elementary school. Remember some kid was claiming that Mortal Kombat had like a nudity code that you could do.
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember that.
There was always weird urban legends about these games.
Yeah. That shit's funny.
Yeah, I mean, there was that time, right? Like that peak time where the internet wasn't quite as accessible or as cataloged. And so when someone says it's like, I saw a cheat or whatever, you kind of do have to take it at this like weird 50-50 of like, all right, let's hear this cheat, but like I'll try and look it up later to verify. And yeah, just and so you get some wild shit. I do remember that. I remember specifically people talking about like when The Sims could be nude, and I was like, that can't be possible. Like I've heard this cheat so many times it doesn't make sense. And then like that was the introduction to me of like, no, it's not a cheat, it's a mod. And you're like, oh, what do you mean? You can change the game? You can do that? Like, and then but it's like stuff like that. Yeah, like someone just tells you, and you like have to. That doesn't sound real. No way. Like,
cases it's not.
My earliest experiences interacting with the internet was to look up video game stuff. Because I was born in the mid 80s, so by mid 90s, 10, 11, 12 years old or whatever, I was at that window of time where like a lot of people started getting internet, or a lot of places started getting internet, but I didn't have it in the house yet. So like I would ask my mom to take me to the library just so I could use the internet to like look up walkthroughs for video games that I got stuck on as a kid. And like that's what the internet was to me in its earliest days. It's like a tool to learn more about the video games I grew up with. It was really funny, and actually makes a lot of sense in hindsight now. Yeah, I'm a bit of an old guy.
Everyone on YouTube is younger than me, and everyone in the furry fandom's way younger. It's
no.
I feel so old.
I'm an old man. I'm 36.
Oh wow. You're,
So yeah,
I think Colonel's around that age.
yeah. So
I,
yeah,
I say, oh wow, like I'm not 32.
yeah,
what the fuck?
not a big gap at all.
and,
But yeah,
Andrew's a year
that's
older
what
than me.
that's what was so funny about like the early days of the internet. It was I can't even remember what those websites were called because this was pre Game Facts, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But I grew up with a lot of the other side to that coin is I didn't own any consoles growing up. I always had to go to friends' houses to play like the popular video games. I just had Amiga computers growing up, so like
Yes.
I played a lot of weird like puzzle games or adventure games that like no one at school would have seen. Like I had no one I could talk to like about these games, so like it was just like I would get stuck in a game. There was no solution anywhere aside from some games would have like a 900 number you could call for hints or whatever. They'd be like in the manual, like call this 900 number. But obviously my parents were like, no, like you're not spending money on a phone call for this. So yeah, as soon as I could look stuff up online, it was like, this is what I'm doing now.
People's backgrounds can be so informative about just like their entire taste in video games or like why their YouTube channel's the way it is and so on. Like just like the era you grew up in, what games existed at the formative years and so on. Like, so like us being separate about like 40 years, that's like an entire generation of games. Like it's a different, it's an entirely different contest, especially since I was a late adopter of PC in particular, and didn't really like. I played like as far as PC games go, I played like some educational games, Age of Empires 2, Diablo 2, and then kind of nothing all the way up until like World of Warcraft years, where suddenly I kind of had a working PC that could play games. So I was just playing like console games, but I also didn't have like a hyped up friend group of people that followed trends or anything. So like I wasn't really playing Mario or Zelda. I would be the person coming, like I did play Rareware games, but other than that I would come home with like Mischief Makers and Silent Bomber and The Bouncer, and I just have a completely different introduction to like all of this stuff. And I think like Toaster was online playing like primarily like he's primarily playing like shareware games, like totally. Strange online free games, and like old like stuff that would eventually lead to like influencing stuff like I guess like Off and Lisa and some of these other like very specific, like when I encounter certain specific games or like discuss Echo, for example, he comes back with a completely different lineage for this entire concept of gaming that is entirely a series of names of games I've never heard of before, because he just lived in a different space. It's just wild how this all works.
That's great. Yeah, I would relate to him a lot with that, because I had like my dad was part of like an Amiga users group. They would have like disc swap events, I guess. I never went to one of them. But so there was like a lot of stuff we would get, like copies of games, like and shareware stuff. And there's like one game I remember from my childhood that like, it was not a very well made game. It was definitely like some homebrew type of thing. But I've since like looked for it online, and it's not acknowledged anywhere. So it's like, oh man, somewhere I have like some lost media like Amiga game, because it's ungoogleable. It doesn't exist in any Amiga games database. And it's like, I know I'm not making this up in my head. Like I remember the name of the game and like what it looked like. So yeah, I definitely.
It's such a specific experience when you have like these really strange memories that you can't quite put back together, and you try to figure out whether or not you imagined a game or not, basically. And then one day you're watching a video essay and like its music shows up in the background, and you just like, hang on a minute, what's happening here?
Yep.
Anyway, that's probably enough discussion of Dark Souls, which I hope it comes across that was all. This was all just a specific kind of criticism you can only have of a thing you love. Like, we're in too deep about these games, so we're discussing Dark Souls the way that Overwatch players discuss Overwatch, basically. Whereas, like, well, you're still playing Overwatch. I'm like, yes, I am. But I mentioned Echo, and I kind of wanted to poke at that more, actually.
Sure. Yes. Echo is awesome. I should share a little bit about my background. I've never like identified as furry. Furry adjacent is a term I've heard thrown around that might apply to me, I think. But I followed you some years back without actually engaging with your content at all. I was making a Dark Souls Dissected, and I was looking for footage of something that would be relevant in one of my videos. And I think just from the brief, like, 30-second segment I watched of your video, where like I was clicking around, I was like, I hit the subscribe button because I figured like, oh, I like this guy's vibe, so maybe I'll check out stuff later. Then I never did. I never watched any of your Dark Souls Let's Plays. Like, I didn't watch any of them. And then more recently, in recommendations, it's just like scrolling through YouTube. Like, I watched a lot of YouTube on the TV, and just like going down and down, and like then I see these thumbnails pop up for like, I'm like, is this a furry dating sim? I'm like, what is this? And I see it's someone I'm subscribed to, and I'm just like, that seems interesting. Let me check this out. So I find it really funny that like we both are huge like Dark Souls nerds and everything, but that's not how we crossed paths. It was because of your Ad Astra playthrough that like I clicked on that because I was like, what's this game with this kind of hot furry guy? Like, what's going on here?
You were brought in by Amicus. He's irresistible.
And it's something that resonated for me. I've never played any virtual novels before. I grew up with like adventure games, like Secret of Monkey Island, like those kind of games. But yeah, I've never played a virtual novel. I've never played a dating sim. So it's all this stuff is just,
and so like
completely alien for me.
Not too long after I just watched one of your videos, because you have this resurgence of like all these like Elden Ring videos to go through and so on, and it's just a whole new world of stuff to try to unpack for you. Like, I'm then playing Bloodborne with Bird in like the cathedral ward or whatever, and we're just like struggling through this weird experience of like trying to go through the forest and everything, and I'm trying to play this game I half remember while trying to guide someone that doesn't know what they're doing, and we're trying to just, in this very specific context of like these 2-hour streams we do once a week, so there's like a time pressure to like try to do it and make progress each week, or it's like kind of a wash. And then you just start talking in my chat, and I'm like, I recognize this name. just a very unexpected appearance. And then
that's funny. Yeah, I'm trying to put a Bloodborne chat, but I'm here to be like, hey man, like these furry visual novels, they're pretty great.
Yeah, you bring up that I'm the reason you've like read through both Ad Astra and Echo, and I'm like, this is so much to unpack quickly. Where it's like, hey, one of the more clinical like Dark Souls like information based YouTuber people knows you exist, just showed up in your stream chat in real time, not even your comment section or whatever, and is saying that you're the reason that he's read like a sum of gay furry literature because of you that like is greater in word count than like the Odyssey.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. Yeah, it's all your fault, and I thank you for it.
It's so good. It's all so good, and that's why I was on such a mission to make a video after the Legacy one, just to like explain like, I need to convince people Ad Astra is actually interesting, like as not just like, it's not good for a furry visual novel, it's genuinely really interesting and well made, and like stands as a piece of art that no one will look at outside of this really specific niche fandom.
Yeah, it what really worked for me, it's something you talked about a little bit in your video essay, just about like sort of like the bluntness and grossness to how the scene opens up, where it's like he injects this thing into your brain, and it's like a touches of body horror. And I was just kind of like, oh, like,
it's
even
such
though
a hook.
It has this setup where it's like a will they won't they, so it has this like romance dating thing in the background, which is kind of interesting to me, because again, I haven't played dating sims, and as a lot of gay people can relate, like a lot of media doesn't cater to your interests. Like we grow up watching movies that are very much catered to a heteronormative experience.
Oh yeah, like we both lived through the 90s where queerness was a joke to be disgusted by, and then that was the only appearances we had in almost anything besides being cool Disney villains.
Right. And so part of me was open to the idea. I'm like, would I even be interested in this as like a wish fulfillment dating sim type of thing? Like maybe that would be like, that's kind of interesting. But I was so pleased though that it was a lot more than that, and that it was like a lot weirder and darker than that, because that's the stuff that really resonates with me. Like I want to walk away from these things like feeling like a little unnerved and creeped out, and not like, oh yay, like I just had a hot date with my wolf boyfriend or whatever. But
oh yeah, and because there's you gotta get attention. You gotta be inflammatory a little bit when you make videos with your titles and thumbnails. So it's like, this is the best furry visual novel ever made, and that makes people argue with the title a bit. And one of the inevitable things is that people bring up Echo a lot because that's the other game that is often more highly regarded as art from the same developer. But it's also like, and it is genuinely fantastic, but it's also more bloated and more clumsy and more like explicitly made like over the course of like almost a decade, like by several different people and people who are changing over time and so on. And like it's like to discuss that game. I'm sorry to constantly quote McSkinny from the chat logs, but like we were recently praising how well written the Chunk of Echo was in an episode, and he's like, oh, I just skip all of that, I was cringing so hard, I wrote that entire part in one afternoon on Adderall. Like the artists behind, it kind of ties into the Miyazaki stuff a little bit, but like the artists behind this stuff are much less like concrete and intentional and like masterful about all this stuff necessarily. Like they're often like, oh god, that's in the world forever, I wrote that. Even with the good stuff, it's just kind of all over the place. But like Ad Astra has such a masterful intro and bait and switch, and just like it knows how to catch your attention. And like I have definitely started like 10 different furry visual novels where it is incredibly, you just sit there wondering like, when does anything happen? Like when does something interesting happen that hooks me into a character or a person or the world or something? But like Ad Astra so masterfully sets up this idea of like, here's all these the store page is just bait. It's just all like innuendo in every screenshot and a bunch of hot dudes and hints at the idea of like, oh, what's going to happen with these characters. But it opens with an abduction, body horror sequence, and attempted manslaughter and near incineration, and like it goes so quick, so fast, while constantly layering questions and not answering them until later. That like it's a fantastic narrative hook. So many people need to learn from this smut.
That's part of what hooked my attention too. Yeah, for the attempted murder too. I'm just like, oh, you literally just tried to kill that person. I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the protagonist tries to kill the character,
the love interest or whatever.
Is the advertised love interest. The reason you would download the game is because this character is supposed to be the character you date, and like he almost dies, and it's intense, and it's very much like, it's very much not like some sort of accident or misunderstanding. It's like very much like the protagonist is trying to kill this man, and he very nearly succeeds. What an absolute trip.
I will say that I think I prefer Echo overall, but it's definitely, like you said, it's more bloated and a lot more unpolished. I feel like it has lower lows than Ad Astra has. But like whenever it's leaning heaviest into its horror elements, that's like when it really pulls me in. Like, oh yeah, this is what I want. So I know you have a couple routes to go, so I won't say any specifics or whatever. But yeah, I like that feeling of feeling like unnerved, creeped out from these stories. So the idea, the bait and switch that both of them sort of do, this will they won't they sort of thing between Chase and Leo, like I love how far south that goes. Just like any hope of this relationship working out just utterly tanks, and like that's what makes it so cool to me, because I'm just like, okay, cool, like they wanted to do something else other than indulge in this, and that's what makes it work for me.
I really think it's worth interrogating too. Discussing it involves too much spoilers, but there's so much interesting parallel between Amicus and Leo, almost as if one character was written as a response to the other one, like iterating on the idea in certain ways, to the point where really specific things are in common. And I'm fascinated by that, and it's definitely coming up if I ever finish this nightmarishly long game and then write about it, which involves playing the whole thing again at least once.
Yikes.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to get through, but it's wild. But this is sort of a spiritual successor to the last podcast, which is that I don't know if people know this about you, and I'd feel slightly iffy on revealing it if it wasn't just right there in your Twitter bio, but you are gay.
Yes.
If that wasn't clear from the conversation up to now.
Oh my god, I am
big reveal.
shocked.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing because like I make sure to put that because I've been out for a long time. I've been out since I was like 23, or so 22, 23. I don't know, somewhere around there. But I sort of I have some awareness that like I don't really engage with the stuff I make. There isn't really queer content in my Dark Souls videos, and I've slipped in a few innuendos and jokes here and there, but it's like, one joke every like what out of 4 hours of content or something like. So it's kind of in the background, but I made sure on my like Twitter bio, just like, oh, I want to put that up front so like people know who I am a little bit more as a person. Because if you don't put that stuff out there, like I hate this whole the homophobic crowd always has a thing where they'll allege gay people of that being their identity, and I feel like I would be the exact opposite of that. I have a whole YouTube channel, hours and hours of content where like people don't know that about me. But if you don't put that out there, like you get some real weirdos showing up, like to like say some pretty messed up stuff, and even having the audacity to think that you might agree with them.
And like and like that happened the moment I started even discussing anything about being gay and furry and so on. Is that like immediately it's like this is your entire personality, and I'm like you're saying this to me on my Let's Play channel where I'm making the same content I've made for the last decade. I just also acknowledge this thing sometimes. And that's and it's like, it's not my whole personality. It's that you're so homophobic and fixated on this that it's the only thing you think about every time it comes up. It's like when you watch a 2-hour video essay and then one political topic comes up for 10 seconds and that's the entire video's topic somehow in your brain, because like, that's just how hard people fixate on this stuff. And like I was sent a screenshot of a moderation interaction you probably had with people because they reacted to my presence in your content. Some mutual viewer of ours spotted that and shared it in my Discord. Where like people are like, oh, you better watch out for that Keith guy, and I'm like, all right.
So I haven't even had a conversation with you about this yet, but so like I posted to my community tab or whatever being like, hey, check out, like I joined Keith's stream for like some Let's Plays or whatever, and I had like 3 people show up to like I didn't share it with you because I didn't want to like put those negative thoughts in your head or whatever, sometimes like spreading that stuff's annoying or whatever, but like people were like trying to warn me about associating with you because you're a gay furry, and I was just like, oh my god! Like,
and some of them were warning you about like SJW type stuff. Basically, like they were hinting, you can tell from his interactions, like he's some kind of leftist or something. I'm like, oh,
I'm like, these people have no idea who I am if they think that like they could like warn me about associating. Like I'm kind of, like I said, I'm kind of an old dude. I'm pretty far left politically. I'm gay. Just because I don't talk about it in my Dark Souls videos, it doesn't mean I'm not like some like. It doesn't mean I'm a blank slate where you can just show up and like say homophobic stuff and think I'm going to agree with you. Like that's crazy.
Like for me, I was bracing myself because I was like, okay, here comes like someone on the internet who's mad at me. What's it going to be? Was it my take about this or that piece of media that because people hold that against you somehow, or like, is it going to be like, oh, because like I have responded when I shouldn't in the past. And so I've gotten in arguments in my comment section, and it's a bad look.
Happens.
Like I've had bad look moments throughout my career on YouTube where I look like a dickhead, and that's fine. So I'm just like, okay, which one is it now? Which very specific thing does this person remember? And they just feel the need to warn people about because they're just that online. And so when it was the furry stuff, I was just so funny to me that they're like warning someone like that's like. This horrible secret that was going to come out is that the thing that I am openly branded as is a thing to discover about me.
Like that would be a deal breaker to me. Like I said, just because I've been existed in a furry adjacent like pocket or whatever, like doesn't mean like I used to be in a band where like the band lead composer was a furry. Like this isn't something new to me. I'm just like. So yeah, seeing that reaction was like bizarre to me, and it's sort of like. At some point, I feel almost more obligated to like increase references in my content in some way just to make sure I'm not like relying on the audience too much, because I don't want to cater my content to people who like would hate me for who I am.
Yeah, like it's rough because like when you do it, you do end up having to engage more often with the people who will treat you poorly for being the way you are, and that sucks. But also you bounce these people off, which is nice, but also like and like I've baited this on purpose a few times. Like there's a scene in The Last of Us Part 2 where where the queer couple encounters a homophobic character in the like near the intro, and I entered the I did one of my like basically like stop the game podcast moments just in reaction to that. And I also did a similar thing where I did a whole breakdown of like the racist mug that you find in Disco Elysium at the beginning of the game. In both these cases, I do a big breakdown where, as a result, it's very obvious where my leanings are and so on. Mm-hmm. And then I just set that episode's comments to moderate all comments mode because it just baits all the worst people to just out themselves, and I can just sit there and just ban people and just not let any of the comments actually be visible. Yes, yep. It's so good, because one of the worst things that happen, like, and you hinted at this a second ago, like a really revolting feeling is when someone says something awful under the impression that you're going to agree with them.
Yes.
Like, it's very much like you're in a weird, like you're in a room of people. It's a very specific thing to say, but I'm sure you know what I mean. It's like when you're in like, say like some kind of social context full of people that you don't know that well, that are like friends of friends of friends, or like some sort of like family relation at some party that you don't really know anyone at or something. And then someone just kind of like says something super homophobic or racist as like a joke, and then looks around looking for like confirmation and like camaraderie, and expecting it because they're sure that everyone agrees with them. And you have that uncomfortable moment of everybody kind of laughing along and wondering whether or not they're being polite or playing it off, and they're bothered by it, or everyone genuinely agrees with the horrible thing you just heard, because that's just a thing that happens just in circles. You just encounter moments like this, and sometimes you're the target of the thing, but no one in the room knows that. And it's just like a revolting scenario to be in. And as a YouTube content creator, people get this like parasocial bond to you, and because they like your content, they kind of project all of the blanks they don't know about you to be like them, and that you generally agree on things. And so they'll say horrible things and then be surprised if you don't go along with it. And it's horrible. It's like I actively want to filter out people like that.
It's worse. It's much worse than someone just directly saying hateful things at you. Like, because it, someone saying mean things to you about you is just kind of like, all right, well, that person's just an asshole. But like, someone thinking that you might be on their side with them on the subject is more like, oh crap, like I've cultivated like an audience who wouldn't actually like me as a person. Like, that's kind of like, again, at the end of the day, I'm making videos about Dark Souls mechanics. It's pretty apolitical, I would say, overall. Like, it's just about game mechanics, so you don't have to agree with me on everything to enjoy my content. That's not the issue. But it's like, the second you're going to like leave comments for me to read about, like, warning me about someone being gay or something like that, it's just like, it's insane. It's ludicrous. So yeah, that feeling, like you said, of being able to like sort of see who reacts that way and just do like a mass purge. It's very
yes.
It feels good. It feels good to do a purge. And I've done that on Twitter. Like I said, that's in my bio. I post more freely on there because it's just like whatever, shouting into the void kind of website. Don't get to do that on Twitter as much, but I mean on YouTube as much. But that makes me realize, like, I'm in a phase where like some more purging probably has to happen. Just because of like interacting with people that way is just not pleasant.
Looking forward to the Blythe video.
There we go. All right.
There's your gay content Elden Ring video.
Yeah, so
there's very little access to actually bridge those topics at all. Like,
totally.
Especially as somebody who's doing like mechanical, like wiki style breakdowns. Like, it's just there's almost no overlap between these concepts. It's just very difficult to do. I think I did, like, in one video I talked about like twinking, like invasion mechanics, and I was like, not to be confused with the other type of twink or whatever. Like some stuff like that has been sprinkled in my videos, but it's pretty few and far between. Let's see, because you didn't make the "You Can Ride Blythe" video, did you? That's someone. No. I think that was someone else. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was probably a Zuli video, who is also a great, fantastic Souls content creator. She's out of minds, and she's way deeper. That's the kind of funny thing with my content, that's not bringing things back to Dark Souls too much. But I'm not a programmer. and I'm not really adept at hacking, so it's really funny that like I position myself to do like these deep dives into the mechanics because it's just like I'm kind of dumb. Like I'm proud that I've been able to think of like clever testing solutions to figure out how things work. But at the end of the day, like when it comes to like really doing a deep dive, like I'm gonna hack into this to figure out how it works. It's like I have to like talk to other people in the community because like I don't know how to do any of that stuff. But yeah, Zuli put out that fantastic thing about riding. I think she had a series of videos about like different things you can ride with some alterations to the code, and you can ride Blythe apparently, which to a lot of people they would mean they wish they could do that in a very different way. But
it's just you clip into him and he runs around.
Have you seen any of them sounds while you do that?
Well, have you seen it? I think they just essentially found like there's like an anchor point. There's an anchor point that allows riding like with torrent essentially, but with other creatures, and you can hack it to start working, but it's incredibly jank in many of the cases because it just absolutely is not implemented in many cases. But it makes you wonder what they had planned for Blythe.
I was gonna say, have you seen the like that official licensed like Elden Ring manga, like the scenes with Blythe in that?
Yeah, where he's just they lean in hard to his like fandom himbo persona essentially.
Himbo status times like a million. They went for that comic, and it's kind of amazing. They made him incredibly stupid. Much.
It's just gonna make it sadder that how that turns out. But I guess that's like a comedy comic though, so I don't even know where it'll ultimately go. I'm just frustrated that it's like a web only thing and like chunks of it disappear and only some of it's available at a time. And I'm like, just let me pre-order this. Just send it just send me the book, please. I just want to have a copy of this.
I have no idea what the release is. I've seen just the random screenshots on Twitter. So yeah, I have no idea what the release of that even looks like.
Yeah. No, there was the internet was on fire for a bit in certain circles when they released that specific Blythe intro issue.
Oh, I can imagine.
And just his entire characterization was like, like they gave him dog behaviors. Like he would chase balls and things. You're like, what are they doing?
Amazing.
Fantastic. Amazing. That's one of my favorite storylines in a Souls game, honestly. Like how they handle Blythe and Randy and everything. And it's one of my ongoing things is like Toaster is somebody who somehow like picks up this encyclopedic understanding of the narrative on his first try playing through one of these games. And I don't understand how that's possible at all. I have no idea how he can tell what's happening. But the big exception for me is that like I'm always confused by the narrative of Souls games, but I get attached to all the individual characters, which are often very divorced from the actual narrative. They're just also bystanders and and victims in this whole thing in a way that's similar to you. And there's even like a consistent contract you're dealing with From Software, where you just know these all end badly. None of these characters have happy endings, like out of principle, seemingly. Like there's this very berserk commitment to the idea that this is not going to end well for anybody. And so when they introduce a character like Onion Knight or Blythe, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. Fuck. There's no happy ending here. And they're just, and every interaction you like them more, and you're like, no, please stop. But those are what get me invested in the narrative, or a part of the narrative at least, is that seeing those characters and getting attached to their stories and their quirks is very interesting. And that makes it all the more frustrating that in Elden Ring it's so hard to do quests. Like there's like 3 different characters who their quest line is like half their quest line is them teleporting all over Leonia of the Lakes in random directions, and you have to just somehow find them. And I'll just be honest, I cheated. I when I was making my Let's Play, I just like pretended to discover them, like, oh wow, there you are, and just kind of like tried to make it feel like a gameplay thing and not just me like doing a video guide, because it's essentially what I was doing was just looking up on the wiki where everyone is, because I just wanted to make any progress. And it's like I think it's kind of the detriment that they handle it that way, because that's one of the most relatable parts of a Souls game's narrative is the people that are in it, because you can see like the lady with the eyes, the Shabriri grapes, like that is a clear through line that is understandable by an audience member, even if they don't even know what half the words involved mean. They're just like, oh, here's a very clear, this person believes this, and their belief is being tested and shaken along these paths. And then there's a revelation at some point, and then there's a response to that revelation. And that's kind of the arc that each of them has as across the board with these characters. And missing those, I feel like you miss a huge amount of the narrative and like why you would be invested in Elden Ring. But missing it isn't your fault either. Like if they're actively impossible to follow.
Yeah, and I forgot who said this, but I remember someone was criticizing it, and I felt like they hit the nail on the head. It's like NPC quest lines were already tricky to manage in Souls games to begin with, right? Like it was easy to mess them up, or just like miss out on them. Now take that same system, don't make it any more accessible than it previously was, but now put it into an open world game where it's even like easier to miss out on them when they move somewhere else to another location. Like, oh, why would I go back to this one cave? You know, like, I might miss out on whatever Bach is up to in his storyline. Like, yeah, it's very easy to, like, it was already easy in Dark Souls and Demon Souls to just whatever, like, not have a NPC storyline progress all the way. But yeah, now in Elden Ring, it's like it's a lot. If you need a guide to progress the NPC quest lines. You need a guide.
Like it's rough that Solaire teleports to like that one statue that's broken, or how Siegmeyer Siegmeyer teleports to like the Blight Town out of nowhere.
He winds up in the swamp. Yeah,
like zones you would not play in that order in almost any playthrough, basically. So they're very difficult to get the entire narratives out of on that level, but that's within the context of like, here is a world where there's like a dozen zones at play realistically, and they're largely placed in places you would reasonably access for some reason, even if the play order is weird. So like if you're searching, it's at least doable. But Liurnia of the Lakes is an incredibly massive area with almost no landmarks besides the fact that you're going around the rim of a lake. And characters just kind of warp around every time you talk to them, not even proceeding in a particular direction. And like they don't like the pilgrimage lady isn't like following like a specific path for her specific pilgrimage that's like traceable and comprehensible to the player. She's not showing up at like, I think at one point she might show up at like a cathedral or at a destroyed church, but for the most part they don't show up anywhere you would recognize, and some of them are even actively hidden. Yeah, to the point where like you'd go to the spot and not be able to find them. If I remember correctly, I missed there's a few storylines I failed because I didn't start looking them up soon enough, basically. And one of them was very rough. One of them was the Golden Mask guy. Because and that was bad because I was trying to do faith build, and that you need to get through his storyline to gain access to some of the best spells for that. The obvious part is when the faith guy from the beginning of the game shows up with him at a bridge that you will reasonably find in the zone before the capital of the city, the capital city. Like that's normal. He's like, that's a very easy place to find him. That bridge is a landmark. But his next location is like a super secret weird ledge behind a coliseum that's also itself like an esoteric secret to get to in the first place, and there's nothing pointing you there, and you don't have to find that place to finish the zone. And if you don't find him before doing a certain story beat, he just dies. And you're like, oh, I just missed that then. And like or like the Dragon Slayer guy. He's like, I am the Dragon Slayer guy. Saw you beat that dragon. Anyway, and like I never met that guy again. Like he's got a guy. There's a guy with a funny hat. There's the guy with the funny hat and he talks about slaying dragons. Never seen him fight a dragon, but he's near a dragon at least. And then later on, I'm going towards where Patches is, and I get ambushed by somebody. And if you check my footage, you see the dialogue on the bottom of the screen from that guy, who apparently counter invades to help you with the invasion, but the fight was over so fast I didn't see him or meet him. And the next time I meet him is just after his storyline's over, and he's now been replaced by a new character, because I was supposed to find him hidden behind the teleport glyph on the broken bridge by the university.
Yep,
like
yep.
like one of the most secret places and you're introduced to those teleport glyphs by one of them being on a solid wall you can't walk through. So it feels counterintuitive that you can even walk through those without getting teleported. So I didn't even know you could go behind the glyph. And to point to that, going backwards down the ramp towards the first to reach the backside of the first glyph is itself an overgrown, unvisited area with a reward at the end, like it's a secret. So on one hand, they treat going past the glyphs like a secret, but on the other hand, they put an NPC interaction required to proceed a story behind one. And like at some point, I'm like, they're doing this on purpose, I guess. I don't know I'm not clear on their goal, honestly.
It was definitely on purpose because as much as they streamlined things for Elden Ring, they did not streamline NPC questline accessibility. And yeah, that's like I don't know what the sweet spot for that would be, because again, rewarding exploration, it's cool to have secrets and have higher stakes for the secrets sometimes, like, you know, to have an entire area like Ash Lake gated behind a secret area is pretty cool. And you know, I could see that being extended to some NPC quest lines, but it's like you also need to have enough content that's also not done that way to be satisfying.
Which I think to some extent is Ronnie. Like to the point where you can literally the entire first half, practically, maybe not half, but all of the opening steps of the Ronnie quest chain are optional, and you can just skip them and you still continue the storyline, which is often not how these work. Like good luck experiencing Jarburg accidentally. Like not finding it, but encountering any of its narrative, because it involves NPCs from like 3 different zones done in a specific order without this stuff happening, or else somehow I actually don't know the answer anymore still of how to make the Jarburg storyline happen, where the guy from that other zone comes over and has a whole character arc there or something. But like Ronnie has a similar level of opaqueness where the character herself only shows up in a specific location at a specific time of day after a specific threshold has been met. And then Blythe requires you to go to a specific ruin, hear him howling, then go back to a specific NPC that you have no reason to think is attached to him and is not nearby, and also you don't necessarily even have reason to think is a character that will get more dialogue. Ask him about the howling you heard. He teaches you to whistle, and then you go back to Blythe and whistle, and then everyone has their hubba hubba moment where the character jumps down and is twice as tall as them and speaks with a nice soft voice, and you're like, I'm having complicated feelings right now. But that's entirely optional, and a huge number of people that played the story and even finished the Ronnie quest chain never encounter either of those introductions where you meet Blythe or Ronnie. Instead, you can just walk into their building and just meet Ronnie there, and Blythe's a hologram along with the other characters. And so I don't think you can meet any of those other characters early. I don't think that I missed them. Like I don't think you meet the giant early or anything. They're just, you meet them as holograms, then you talk to them later. But
I'm forgetting with the giant.
Yeah, the blacksmith that's always reading. And then the mage that's just a dickhead.
Yeah. He's great.
Yeah.
he's such an asshole.
I don't think you meet any of them earlier, but like in those cases, it's kind of like a moment of like, Blythe is like a character you can have more background with optionally, essentially. And that's kind of interesting. Like you can meet him as just one of the many people as part of Ronnie's ensemble when you arrive at her base. Or you could have done an entire quest line with him already where you help him go after, I'm looking for a man named Darrowell and all that, and just go on a whole thing with him. And that's like, in a way, that's kind of cool that you can have this additional background. Just like I think that's just like how it's a secret that you find him in the vault, because he gets locked into Darrowell's spot later, and it's a completely missable element of the narrative that will still proceed if you don't find it.
Yeah, I think that's very much the way to handle it. If they could find ways that, like, some of the NPC quest lines where, like, you miss out on a ton of stuff if you don't do it in the correct order and find all the little things that you have to do. Like, it would be nice if they found a way to incorporate them more deeply into the story where it was easier to run into them at certain points for certain things, just to sort of pull them into your consciousness a bit more. But yeah, the Elden Ring is, for the most part, doesn't make much of an effort to do that.
And part of the struggle for me is that like the world is so open, and like on one hand I have an issue where I'll just ignore signposting and be like, what's over here, and go off for 2 hours. But on other hand, situations I feel like I followed signposting too hard and got punished for it, because like Ronnie, they gave you this like very specific way to meet Blythe and Ronnie optionally early. And for a lot of people, that encounter with Ronnie is like one of the cool elements. Is like this weird multi-armed doll lady just shows up by your bonfire, and you have this very strange interaction in a place that seems designed for you to be there. This might be an instance of like how Souls games often feel front-loaded with higher quality, higher developed content that has more attention put to it, and then as you go on, it gets more sparse. But like not the first bonfire itself, but the first the ones that's in that little broken church.
Yeah.
Like you have a special merchant with tons of dialogue that none of the other merchants will ever have. You have secret encounters with Ronnie. You're going to most likely have several conversations with your I want to say my firekeeper, because I'm so bad at updating my dialogue from game to game.
Firekeeper is good. That works.
But like you have so many unique interactions in that one specific church that makes it feel like a special location. But it's a big old open world, so like you're not, it feels like they designed the zone so you're going to specifically go on expeditions, then go back to that location to rest over and over again and level up. Like it was, that place feels like Firelink Shrine.
Yeah.
In some previous version of the game that didn't have the round table or something, and didn't cover the map with 500 warpable spots that all have equal significance, and there's no reason to go to a specific one ever.
Yeah, and I think their best handling of all of this in a late game area is Volcano Manor. Basically it boils down to like there should be more volcano manors in the world. I think that's kind of what it comes down to. More places where NPCs you might have missed might congregate or wind up or whatever. There should be more, but it's basically you have like the Round Table Hold, you have Volcano Manor as like these two places where there's a bunch of NPCs, and then everything's very, very sparse outside of that.
Yeah. And like part of my issue with that zone was the fact that like it feels like they set up that one specific church to be so important in a Firelink kind of way, but if you don't play exactly the way they want you to, you just break it. Like within 5 minutes of starting Elden Ring, basically you can just be in Liurny of the Lakes, and it's not even unreasonable to do so, because that's just where the road leads that you're at the beginning. And so if you just happen to go up that road that goes along the cliff, and some tornado wolves jump at you and stuff, which is very funny, and if you do what I do, which is you just don't happen to notice the turn off that leads to this like big castle, and you instead end up going through the archway into Liurnia and be like, oh, what's this place? Let's check this place out. You've instantly skipped the beginning of Ranni's quest chain, and that encounter's gone now. She'll never show up for you. Like that's kind of a huge bummer. Like that's an introduction to a character, and it feels like they could have scripted her to show up at a number of other locations all the way up until the moment where you actually arrive at her keep. But instead, I think the trigger is that if you go through that gate and arrive at Liurnia at all, even though you're still a massive distance from her where she is, she instantly will never show up now. And that's just like, it's just over. And it's just kind of like I'm just so mixed on their implementation of these elements, because like it's a strange way to handle it. Like I think about how like Jedi Fallen Order has like some whoa surprise moments in the middle of its seemingly open experience, like that are akin to like how your firekeeper will now talk to you about certain topics along the way. Like in Jedi, you can just get kidnapped suddenly, and it's a bit like the Bloodborne thing. But much like the Bloodborne thing, it feels like an incredibly specific interaction with a very specific enemy, but actually that guy's just kind of everywhere, and like everyone has a different experience of getting kidnapped into the Hypogean jail in Bloodborne. And like I believe there's different routes you can take through Jedi after you've hit a certain story beat that will trigger your kidnapping at different locations and so on. And so you can have that mix.
That's cool.
You can have that mix of like, oh, this is a surprise that happened when the game design, like your sense of how game design flows tells you this can't happen, but then it does. And you do that by kind of making it happen in a number of different places. I think about how like and I know that Elden Ring knows about this idea because like they did it. I was convinced incorrectly that I did not understand that I had deprived myself of leveling accidentally by not going to that church at the beginning of the game, because
Okay.
that's where my cutscene triggered to activate leveling finally. But it's actually when you like activate X number of graces or something.
Yeah, it's like it has to be. Forget what the exact requirement it is. I think Lance McDonald is the one who like first kind of pinpointed that and explained it to the community. But I think it's you have to after 3 graces, she's unlocked. But it's like only with certain like there are some graces that won't count towards that count.
Yeah.
So it's like has to be 3, but maybe for you it's actually more than 3 because maybe you went to one that wasn't one of the allowed 3.
Yeah, but there's people who would say this is like counter to their entire design philosophy because however these games come out is the genius dream of Miyazaki, and any other thing would be a counter to his vision or something. But I do kind of like imagining a version of Elden Ring where NPCs worked like she did.
Yeah.
Where like you like NPCs are tied to specific zones and they just sort of appear by graces when you hit certain thresholds, and you can like experience a narrative from front to back from these adventurers who frankly are just kind of floating around a zone and not reacting to the environment, and the place you meet them in is not like being remarked upon in the conversation or anything. They're just kind of there. And it's like, yeah, the lady with the missing arm and the lady with the missing eyes could both just kind of show up periodically at graces as after you rest at them once you hit certain thresholds, and you could see those quest lines through. But instead we get this, and I'm like, I don't know if this is better.
It's tricky. It's like I said earlier, like it's hard to find the sweet spot because I do like the idea of optional missable content, but where the game is currently, do I think that stuff should have been funneled towards the player more? Like definitely, yeah. It's definitely weirdly handled. It's so funny that like the most emotional resonance that you get out of the game are these NPC quest lines, but they're very From Software. It seems like very just like not too concerned whether or not you experience it or not.
Yeah. We got back on
we got back to Dark Souls From Software. Sorry about that. We can get right back off that train if you want though.
No, you guys are good. I mean, don't feel bad or anything. I just unfortunately don't have much to say.
Andrew, how was your vacation? You're back. We haven't had a podcast with the regular cast for like months, and this still isn't one because Colonel's still not here.
Well, it was good. It was a nice, fun, relaxing trip. I went to for context, I went to Prague for a week, and mostly I just stayed with Nea, somebody who is inside of the Discord, or one of the mods on the Discord, and yeah, I was just visiting her again since it's been like I haven't seen her since I moved back from Dubai was the last time, because then we had the great pandemic, so I had no option or opportunity to travel outside of the country again. And so yeah, we like walked around a bunch of like a lot. The city is it feels both weirdly small, but when you look at it, it is exceedingly large. But also it's easily walkable and just has like trams and metros and crap everywhere. It's a very busy place. But also like there's like zero cohesion in its design at all. Like it's one of those countries where people just kept building on top of buildings on top of buildings, just being like, well, this foundation's probably good, and they just build on top of it, and they don't care. It's like some Roman ruins from like 100 years ago. They just built on top of it. Screw it. Like it's just. So you'll see these buildings that are like, yeah, I was built in like the 1600s, and you'll look at a building that goes, I was built 2,000 years ago, and you're like, oh, oh my god, and it's like just barely hanging on, and then but it was interesting. It's cold as fuck. I do not like that. I am not. I'm not a very good cold person. I I prefer, this is why I live in California, is because I love the sun, I love the heat, and I prefer the sun being visible like 99% of my life. And so
I'm
so
so
they were like
horrified to check back and see that the farewell stream we did because you were leaving to go to Dubai is 5 years old now.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that long ago, but like that was at that mark, that was like the 7-year mark of us doing YouTube essentially.
Yeah.
Because we started in 2011 on the Sad Games channel. And so like that was 7 years in, and that was now 5 years ago. So like it's one of those horrifying things where a thing feels relatively recent, but it's actually like almost the midpoint of the history of the thing now.
Yeah. It's that's why I was like, it's been a while. So that, like, you imagine it's the it's been a while since and that was like the last time. Well, no, I guess like the last time I traveled out of the country was like in summer of 2019. And that was it. Like, I could not do it again since then, or until now, basically, just because of a multitude of factors. So it was So it was nice to leave the grand old US of A yet again. See
oh no.
See a different country.
For perspective of how much time has passed. At the time that you were leaving, Illusory Wall had uploaded his first episode of Dark Souls Dissected 2 months ago.
Wow. Okay, that's a long time ago.
This is a thing that
that's
feels
a long time ago.
That's something that feels recent. No, my brain.
Wow.
Sorry.
Yeah, so so that's that just again explains the amount of like time. Like, it's crazy how much time had passed since I don't know, like to not see a friend for that long is very weird to me. Like I'm traveling. I'm going to be traveling to Japan later this year because it's kind of at that same level with another friend of mine, Kel, and Joe, and I haven't seen both of them since 2019. So like it's weird to, like, when you have friends that are outside of the country, you're suddenly like, oh, I need to. How do I can't just like pop over. It's not just can I invite you to dinner or something? I haven't seen you in like a couple of months. It's like,
I need
literally,
to go to Japan. That's like
you should absolutely.
And that's like the dream setup, is to go with like you and Toaster, because like just the raw collective enthusiasm for Japan, and also like Toaster is fluent in Japanese, so it's like a setup
really
where I'm like, okay, I'll just go along. Like I could just. I won't be like terrified of visiting this country I don't understand, because I'm just surrounded by people that just know way more about it than me, and then we can just kind of do a thing with it.
Yeah, so you end up in this situation where you're like, I don't know what that is, and you just point at it, and Toaster's just like, oh yeah, let me just ask, just like full on Japanese or something. It is nicer that way. It's gonna be I mean, more importantly, that is the big problem, is that like traveling outside the country is also like kind of hard to do. It's gotten a lot harder as time has gone by, because it's just gotten a lot more expensive, and planes have gotten a lot more bankrupty, and so, I should say airlines have gotten more bankrupty, and so it's like it's very bad. Like like when I got my tickets, they have the different levels of economy now. There's economy where like you bring a bag, like one very small bag for a weekend trip, basically, and a personal item, obviously. Or you can pay like $150 extra and be allowed to bring one piece of luggage.
Yep.
And you're like, what? What happened? Like, if we all just got like the shitty economy, would the plane fly faster because it has no weight? Would we pay less money for tickets because it doesn't need as much fuel? Like, wait a second, how does this math work now? I'm starting to think you're lying about this. Like, the plane can't fit enough bags in it. Like, what?
Getting plane tickets has gotten really weird, because I'm going to Vegas soon, but I haven't flown in like a decade. So like I was not prepared for like how microtransaction buying plane tickets feels like today, where it's just like you said, like every little thing is so much more. How many bags are you bringing, to the extent that like that used to be a thing, but it is just, it's way worse today than it used to be.
Yeah, and it's not like it's just it was an interesting issue to run into, being like, oh, last time I flew, I wasn't asked this question. No one asked
Yeah.
me if I like if I wanted to pay less to not bring anything with me.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And but the seats are the same, which is like the most annoying part. The fact that you are just, it's like it's either they're obfuscating the price of having luggage on your plane, or this is for people who like got lost somehow. Like someone flew from Prague to the United States for free, or on a boat, or just on a shipping container, and just got lost and needed to get back home and didn't need to bring anything with them. They had no interest. They don't have a backpack, no clothes, no belongings. They're just like, I just need to get back home. Like, there's no reason why you would have this weird one bag only economy, especially like especially with how almost impossible it is to put because like everyone brings a carry-on bag. Like, even if you check
Yeah.
in luggage, you bring a carry-on bag. That's like what it's 2 pieces of luggage for the price of 1. So like the airplanes again don't have more storage, but when you do this, you deny people the access to check in a bag. You like inadvertently create even less space inside of the plane. And so it's like all the planes I went on, people like struggle to get bags in them because they're
Oh
just like,
yeah.
there's no room. And it's like, bro, do you know where there's a lot of room? It's below the plane, like in this whole luggage container that they specifically made for this
But they insist
fucking
on
problem.
charging so much for it that no, and it's also so like, if anything, they should charge to take stuff on the plane, because it's so inconvenient to deal with the process of retrieving it from under the plane. Like, you have to sit there and wait at a place and just kind of pray that no one else steals your bag, and you're just kind of hoping. Like, it takes long enough that there's this whole anxiety aspect of like, yeah, like, did it already go by? Did I miss it? Did somebody leave with it? Do I still wait? Is it gonna be 10 more minutes? What's going on here? And you're like, is my shuttle gonna come before or after my bag even arrives from this place? Am I even standing at the right place? You start just wondering at some point.
Yeah.
But they charge for that privilege. You're like, what? What are you doing to me? But every single, like, I flew to Seattle and Chicago this last year, which actually the only times I've ever flown solo. Like, I had just kind of a dumb like absence of trips in general as an adult, where I went on, like, I would say yes to like invitations to like family trips and stuff like that, but I just kind of like didn't really fully register the idea of like, I am an independent adult and could just make vacations, as stressful as that process can be. But this year I went to PAX West and Midwest Fur Fest, and that involved solo flying to Seattle and Chicago, and in both cases, both ways, like just nonstop, they're like, okay, we're gonna have too many bags. If you could please you can check your bag for free. If we have any volunteers, please. Like, they have to lean on that so hard, because they do not have space for all the bags that they've made the mistake of allowing people on paper to take onto the plane. And
Yeah.
it seems like they just kind of create their own problems constantly that they have no solutions for, and then they just continue doing it every day. Airlines are bizarre.
Yeah, it is very bizarre, and I do find so I specifically for this trip I had got like a nicer backpack to go, like one of those. I basically just did research for like people who travel with one bag on trips. They do that weird like, I only need one bag to cross Europe or whatever. And so I was like, all right, I want to find a backpack like that, so I could put all my clothes and everything that I care about in there, and then I can have one big, nice, empty souvenir bag that I can throw in the plane and get there and just dump full of crap in there that I'm gonna smuggle into the United States and bring it back with me. And so because I did that, I didn't have as much issue myself being able to find space. My luggage was like the right size, the perfect size to fit in those compartments. And I would usually I would usually be able to get on fast enough because I would more or less just do the thing like you would do if you were waiting for an iPhone. You would just sit in the line and just wait because it doesn't matter, right? Like as they have them sectioned off and say like this is group 5 and you're group 5, so I could just sit in the line for group 5, and then when they finally call it, there I'm in first, and now I get to walk onto the plane, put the thing in, sit down. But yeah, there was planes suck. I don't recommend taking them unless you have to, in which case still don't take them. Just walk to wherever you want to go. Much better experience, much better sightseeing. The yeah, and so otherwise like the city of Prague, or so in Prague we end up going to a castle, which was like big. It was a very big castle, unnecessarily so, and it's cooler that the only cool thing about it is that the president of Prague actually lives there. So he lives like in not it's technically
Get
not a
'em.
castle. Yeah, it's not like a castle where you can go in there and be like, haha, I'm in the throne room. Like, I think those elements are there somewhere, but they're not accessible by the public, and that's not really where he goes. But there's like a living quarters section in the castle that is, modern and with amenities. And that is where he lives. So, like, the president's just living in the castle, which is cool as hell. Except that on the castle grounds is this nightmare looking Dark Souls terrifying cathedral, because this country is full of them. And apparently it is like the country of spires. And so there are just like constant amounts of Dark Souls buildings interlaced with a lot of modernist looking normal homes. And you're just like, oh, cool. That's terrifying. And there's like gargoyles in just random places, and just it's such a mess thematically. I would but inside of this inside of
It's
this,
like when real life looks like a plot hole.
yeah, exactly. It almost looks like someone asset flipped this country. Like they didn't think about it. They just bought whatever possible assets they could get and
Prague
threw
is
them
just like
into
an
a city.
unused postal map.
Basically, it is. And it's so inside. So we were taking this tour of this castle, and there's this like little guide. We had that audio guide that tells you about all this fancy information. And so we were learning about all this fun stuff, like one time the castle just caught on fire, and in that fire, there happened to be an important record book that just kept all the details of who owns what land in the entire country. And apparently no one noticed the fire except for the bishop, who saw it like from across the street and was like, that's not good, and like had to run across the street and get the files. Just a whole castle, and no one noticed it was on fire. I'm sure that went over well at the guard meeting every month. Like I can't imagine. But one of the cool things is that apparently in this castle, in this tomb for this very specific pope guy, or very specific king, there is a crown that has a curse on it, and the curse apparently killed a Nazi. Like there's like this curse that in this crown that unless you are literally ordained to wear it, which no one apparently has been except for the guy who last wore it. If you are not ordained to wear it, you will die within a year of putting the crown on. And I couldn't get to the crown. I tried really hard. I was like,
You're like, sign me up. Sweet release.
Yeah, I was so excited. I was like, I will take that challenge. There's no way I'm gonna die to There's like no way I'm gonna die to a curse, right? I could beat a curse.
I don't know. You activate every possible glitch in every other game. Like you're the ultimate playtester. You'd be the one to prove it true.
I did get a curse on my way home, which sucks, which I guess is my fault for trying to actually curse myself. I got cursed, which was I arrived back. So when I arrived back I was in the San Francisco airport. I get in, and I do the baggage thing. I go through the security. Here's my passport. I don't know why they even ask me. They're like, "Where were you?" It's in my passport, idiot. You know how to read? It's right there. Yeah. Just read the passport. And then I walk out, go to my bag, and in the baggage claim, I'm waiting. I see all the baggage go by, and after like 10 minutes, no other baggage comes out. I go, that's it's kind of weird. Where's the rest of our baggage? And so suddenly an alarm goes off, and a guy, like two guys in very bright vests, come out, and they walk on top of where the luggage goes, and they're going down on this thing, and they're talking to each other, and suddenly they start throwing bags from underneath the thing because the thing that moves the luggage was broken. So there was no way to get the luggage out. And so what had to happen was that this very slow, monotonous process of they would step on this specific conveyor belt, they would go down, press a button, it would turn it back on, and then it would start moving really slowly these luggages onto the thing. And then after it does like 3 of them, then too many pile up and it starts overloading it and it can't move them fast enough. And then the alarm goes off again. And so this process repeats like 5 times, with the guy continually going like, okay, I think it's going to work this time. And it still doesn't work. He's very confident, but it never works each time he does it. And I didn't see the conclusion because like after the 5th time, my bag showed up and I got to like take it and run out of there. But it was I think that was like a brief view into the curse I could have had I put that hat on. But I was really close. If not, I would probably say if not for Naya being with me on that tour, I probably would have got in there and put that hat on. It was like really easy to get to. It's I have to say it's very ugly. I feel bad for like the Nazi guy being known by dying for wearing the hat, because I wouldn't tell people that I died from that hat. It's a really ugly hat to die from. But it's like the
most specific
I can't
take you could possibly have.
It's so ugly, man. I don't know how to describe it. It's just an ugly crown. I would not like. I don't know if I was ordained. My first.
What you're saying is you wouldn't be caught dead in it.
Yeah, actually, that is true. I would not be caught dead with that hat on, which is why the curse wouldn't work. It also comes with accessories. It comes with a scepter and a ball.
I was looking at that. It's like the holy hand grenade. Like
yeah, it looks like the holy hand grenade. Yeah. It's very.
Maybe that's the curse.
Honestly, the scariest thing is the case that the scepter comes in, which looks like an actual nightmare weapon. It looks like a Dark Souls club that you would hit somebody with. It's terrifying. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. I imagine if someone was trying to steal your scepter, you have a reasonable sheath to kill them with. You don't need to take the scepter out and get it dirty. You can just blunt them with that thing. I don't know if the ball comes in a case. I don't think it does. I think it's just always is out. I don't know, but yeah, and then I on the castle grounds. Apparently, there was a village. Obviously, castles have villages. There's a village in the castle where all the people used to live, like the I don't know who works at a castle, maids, cooks, the poop shoveler. All of them lived in this little village area. And
3 people.
Go into that.
All 3 of them.
I mean, to be honest, there's like 17 homes, so it wasn't that many people. Or I guess that's all that remained after. When was Prague invented? I don't know. Like it's old, but the I know it was invented by this one king, and I can't remember his name now, but he's named after everything. Like his name is on literally just every goddamn like street, boat, building, car, like just everything has his name on it. It's like, all right, I don't remember it, but he's just everywhere. You could tell how much I really cared about this one particular king. But yeah, and so like in those homes, apparently, so first thing that stood out was that there's no bathrooms. Not even like an attempt. There was literally a communal bathroom for the entire village that was outside of the village, which sucks if it rains, by the way. You have to just in the rain walk to take a shit. And I don't feel like that's very motivating. But also apparently the villages was in use until like 1920 or something like that, like fairly recently, which is terrifying because these rooms are literally not like nothing. There's nothing. You couldn't. I can't even believe that people fit beds in them because the walls from like width-wise, I can't lay down in. They're so small that I am too tall for it. So I would have had to have like, I don't know, a giant size bed. I couldn't even fit in the door. Like the door was almost up to my chin. And I was like, what? Why is this? Who would live like this? I mean, I guess, if you were short, it would make sense. But if you weren't short, why would you live like this? And not only that, but like Kafka lived there for some reason. He apparently, like, his sister owned one of the places and she rented it to him. Like, he didn't even own it. He just rented a shitty. I can't even imagine that. You rented a home and like it had no toilet. Why would you pay for that?
I mean, I feel like that was a setup and a payoff. You're like, there were no bathrooms, not even an attempt. And then you're like, by the way, Kafka lived there. Like you described a place that was Kafka-esque, and then, well,
yeah, right. Like I guess it was good inspiration for him because, like, look where he ended up. But it's just is like it was so weird.
I just love that was like just surprisingly profound phrasing of just like there was no bathroom, not even an attempt. I've just been reeling from that since you said it.
And but otherwise it was pretty fun. We happened to go during a weekday, which was really cool because there was official business happening for the country. So you got to see all these fancy cars driving around with a bunch of fancy people in it. I don't know who they were because they're all European people, and I don't even know the countries, or I don't even know the capitals of every European country, let alone who runs these places. So I don't know who it was, but I saw a lot of fancy guys in suits. And if you were there, fancy guy in suit, driving your car away from the Prague castle, I saw you. So be on your best behavior next time, I guess. Like,
very specific call out. You're rolling your dice. Will he be one of the 2,000 people to see this?
One of them will see it. And also, apparently, there's also we walked around this garden. There's like this beautiful, nice garden area, and attached to it is the Queen's Castle. I think it's actually called like something else, but they call it the Queen's Castle. And no one like the Queen didn't live to see it made, but also her husband didn't live to see it made. So like nobody who asked for this fucking place lived to see this place made, which is a very weird thing to exist, I guess. It's just I thought that was very fun to think about, that like your wife goes like, I would like, I guess, a hobby room, and you build her a cat. I don't know what she wanted it for because she didn't get to live to even do anything with it. So we don't even know what the hell she was going to do with it. So he's like, yeah, I'll build her that. Or I hire someone to build her that. And so he builds that. And midway through it, he just dies. So he doesn't even know what the hell his wife wanted to do with this damn thing because he didn't even get to see the thing being made. It's just a building he contracted out. Who finished it? How did they know to finish it? What if there's like changes that need to be made? What if you just like, what if she hated it? What if she would have hated it? Like, I feel so bad. Like, this thing is tied to her, and maybe it's not even what she wanted. She's like, no, I wouldn't want a giant window in the front that's ugly. I wanted like 16 windows that were shaped like owls. Like, who knows?
I struggle to process the entire concept of construction projects that people start knowing that the project will outlive them.
Oh yeah.
Like that's like I played the game Pillars of the Earth, which is based on the book, and like that is a book about you setting out to build a cathedral that you won't see finished. And like that's such a baffling concept to just have to live through. Like the idea, like, oh, this is my calling, so much so that I literally am just doing one step of it with my entire life.
It's like that one cathedral in Spain. I'm forgetting the name of it now, but that's like it's been in construction for like a long time. What the hell is the name of that? That's gonna bug me. Like I think it's still under construction, maybe. It's been like well over 100 years. Yeah, crazy stuff.
The cathedral that's like the main big Dark Souls cathedral that's in this castle took like I think it was like a couple hundred years to finish. So like there were
Yeah, yeah.
multiple kings who just didn't get to see a full castle or a full like church in their castle, which is also a weird concept to me. Like you just go and pray in like a half finished cathedral every day, and someone's just like, yeah, they'll get it done someday. Just keep giving us money to build it, and we'll finish it. Like what?
Oh yeah,
I
the cathedral I was thinking of, La Sagrada Familia. Yeah, it's been under construction since 1882, and it's not expected to be completed for some time yet, according to Google.
For
Wow.
some time. Like is there's just nobody available? How do you what is the holdup? What's the bandwidth? What's taking up the most amount of bandwidth for this team? Why
So
are they unable to finish the project?
I can't pretend to know anything about its history or construction, but I do know that the architect behind it is famous for doing like insanely intricate and ornate stuff. So that might be part of the process. Like it's just
but
like
but that
every
guy's
little thing
dead,
is like,
right?
oh yeah, oh yeah, for a long time, yeah.
So like so again, like my thought process is like how do we even know we're building it right? How do you even know you're doing what needs to get done?
Well,
Like
you're
he
not going to
could
be
have
getting any more
written
new
them.
input. It's going to be a bit like the
18
Wheel of Time or whatever, where it's just you finish
Yeah.
it based on the
So
notes of what was left over.
so,
Yeah,
But
he
so
died in
what
1926,
guess
so
in
what
some
the
of these
fuck, how is
cases,
that
like
still
you,
going on?
100 years
Like
ago.
how many notes did he leave? Like did he leave like the entirety of the Harry Potter series in like notes for a building? How do you do this? Like what? It's just bricks and wood. Just brick and wood it. Get it out of here. We're done. Wrap it up. Like what's going on?
I do wonder what the physical labor element is that's making it take as long as it does. But as far as like the question of how it
Yeah.
continues, I would imagine it's like the equivalent of like, like whenever you talk about like IPs, for example, like there's like the creator of the thing dies, but then like there's the estate that still has the rights to the thing, and there's still the money that was like the whatever funding is involved likely still exists, and there's probably still someone controlling it, and so it just kind of keeps going forever, I guess. You definitely would hope it'd go
Man.
somewhere at some point.
Yeah, I mean I would hope. It's just it's very weird to like, and I guess in the for like behind, like the longer you go back, I can start to understand. Like, yeah, sure, it takes a while to build a castle, right? You got a lot of tools, it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of everything. You can't just mass produce this shit. So I can understand there's like this expected time amount. But as we have gotten more betterer at building things, more efficient. We have better tools. We have better, well, like more specialized manpower. We have just everything we need to build buildings way better and more efficiently. And somehow that can happen. Like how? How do you have a? How could I can't imagine something being designed 100 years ago is intricate enough that we couldn't just pump it out in like a year. Like there's no way.
I have to imagine there's periods of downtime where like not progress isn't made for like a decade because of like funding
yeah.
or something. Like I would
Yeah,
just
like that.
assume, but yeah.
But that's even funnier. Like there's just a tarp over this church for like for 10 years, and someone's just like, oh God, please send us the money to finish this church that for some reason we just can't commit to just finishing now for cheap. We have to do it the way that this one dead guy recommended us doing it. Like just
We're staring at this thing confused and asking questions, and all I can think about is the fact that like there's probably like a YouTube channel dedicated entirely to obsessing over the history of this exact project in excruciating detail. That's that's just inevitable. They can answer all of your questions.
Probably.
They know about every reason, every piece of drama or upset that set back every generation of this happening, and like the great silence of the 20s and blah blah blah.
And like this picture that you sent is just, it's not even good looking. That's the worst part. Like the statues are amazing.
I kind of love it. It's so well. The guy's name is, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's but it's gaudy, which is funny because it sounds, the word gaudy.
Very accurate.
But yeah, like his stuff is just like so like alien. looking. It's so bizarre.
I wasn't ready
It's
for this. Yeah, the plaster or whatever it is looks like a salad.
Yeah, it just looks like there's a bunch of like stucco on the wall.
I mean, that's what I kind of love about it, just because it's so like it's so excessive and so over the top. Like, yeah, everything he
But
made
also,
was just really weird looking.
why is this hard? Isn't this just you're just taking like cement and then like gooing it in your hands and slapping like throwing it on the wall? It's not like you're intricately weaving these
The
things,
statues
right?
look like they're laughing at the people that are trying to finish the building.
I mean,
Like,
I
look at
think
these
they're
little
actually
shits.
laughing.
Look at them go. They think this is going to ever happen.
I think they're technically laughing at God down here. He's just down here like trying to.
I don't think
to
that's
stop
God.
them. He's like,
I think that's just
oh,
a
is it not?
dude.
I thought that was Jesus. Who is that? Why are well? I mean, whoever it is, this guy's having a bad day because like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids are laughing at him. That's not, and people are playing music while he's being mocked. Like this dude's just getting hard lambasted by the town.
Yeah.
Like holy shit! I've never seen kids laughing at you get background music for it. Like what are they playing? Like a like what's the song that they're playing for them? The
I'm just imagining that whenever they try to
then
start construction of this place again, boss music starts playing.
it is like wait, where I should show you. Hold on. I should probably but anyways, yeah. So there's a lot of sorry, I was thinking I should probably send you the picture of this nightmare cathedral I was talking about. But yeah, so the castle was pretty interesting. Otherwise there's like a lot. Like Prague has a lot of monuments to people dying from communism.
Oh
which
my
is
god!
a really
I just realized that this castle is a work in progress.
No, this one isn't in Prague. But the other one, the castle that that is still being built isn't in Prague.
No, I have another pun. I caught it.
But
I figured it out.
At a time, at one point in time, that joke was accurate.
Well, the one we were just talking about is.
Huh?
Or wait, or was the other? Or was the one we're talking about a minute ago not from Prague? The one that's incomplete.
Yes.
Yeah, that one's
a minute ago is not in Prague.
Damn it.
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, I kind of derailed that.
No.
But yeah, so that is the giant, terrifying cathedral. It's not. I don't think that picture. I don't know if it will go more detail in that picture. Yeah, you can't really like zoom into that picture. There's a lot going on in there. It's got like a whole story and more. It's I think like each door is part of the process of life and death, and then like the window at the top is also a giant like what is it? It's like a story in and of itself going on in that window. It's just too much, honestly. It's very.
It is a lot
for a country that. Yeah, for a country that already has.
You realize that these things take forever to make because they insisted on making every individual brick like a unique asset. Like it has to have its own specific shape, and you can't just sit there and make like 200 of the same one because they won't go anywhere.
Yeah, and you also have to imagine that it's like, fun fact, not only is it this really ornate, unnecessarily complex looking building, it's also a fucking clock tower. Like, which is even worse. Like now you have to hire someone to build a clock in your fucking goddamn church. Like that's not easy either. So it's just there's so much to this one unnecessarily expensively large cathedral, and inside is just so much. It's so big. It's full of like things you can't even touch. So it's like 90% of it can't even be used, and it's I can't even begin to understand
They're very impressive, but it does lead to there's like a subset of people that'll have the gut reaction of like, why don't we do that anymore? See, in the old days, people used to wear suits on planes and stuff like that, and that kind of look at anything that looked fancy from the past. But at the same time, you look at this and you're like, this sure was a lot of work for what is it? What does it do? Who is it for? Like it does serve almost no function besides being a just grotesquely time consuming and expensive and dangerous thing to make. I am like I'm really fixated on this weird ladder shaped lattice thing on the right. There's just like a weird.
I wonder how many I was going to say European listeners are going to have a laugh at like 3 Americans just continuously having their minds blown by ridiculous cathedrals, because this is not like a normal thing for us.
It is not. I'm thankful that it kind of isn't, because I will admit it does make everything look. So it does, not to be rude, but it does make everything kind of look like you're at Disneyland. Like
I think that
look here's
that's a little cart before
here's a
the
good
horse.
example. Look at this. Look at this shit. Like,
I think it's because Disneyland wants to look like this.
and this is cartoonish. That's what I'm saying. This is cartoonish behavior. You can't have regular looking buildings with a fucking castle in the back. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I would be.
It does give off the vibe of like the other buildings are like the ticket booth to the cathedral.
Yeah, like this is a normal home for somebody, and they wake up and there's just a Harry Potter house behind them. Like, why? What's happening?
It is
like,
a lot. It is wild to look at, though. I am jealous though of a lot of European city design though, just because like I have lived so far in suburban neighborhoods of California, and guess what sucks is that like it's nice to have like being in a house is nice. The house is in a bad place though, no matter what. Like, we literally just made an entire country where there's just a giant grid of the same houses repeating over and over again. So if you get out of your house, all you see is your mailbox, your designated housing district's shitty park, and 1 billion copy pasted houses. It's like, I can't eat houses, sir. I need to go places to eat or to have entertainment or live as a person outside of my room. Like, that's kind of like I think the pandemic only makes this worse to some extent. Is the fact that like this is just, we did not make towns in a way to be lived in. Like, you literally just have like we make towns the way that I make cities. Like, I make bases in RTSs. Where I'm just like, I don't know, all the houses go like over there, then you just like make 500 houses over there every time you need to make the number go up for how many people can live in your town, and you don't have to think about like people living there and walking around and accomplishing anything ever. So it's like, I don't know, just over in the corner where I don't look, they'll build 500 houses with no space in between them. That's how America actually works. So huge amounts of our country.
Anything.
Yes, you need to drive a not insignificant distance to do almost anything in your town, because you can't just like get food without one. So like people that can't drive are just at a massive disadvantage, but also like we all like, there's the constant there's the wear and tear on the vehicles, there's the contribution to emissions, but also just the fact that like you can't just like get exercise. Like, and between that and like our subset of processed foods and just how hard it is to get healthy food and so on, I'm like, I was so jealous of how like Joe moved to Japan, and then like we saw him again like images of him like 6 months later, and he was immediately like massively less heavy, because he just escaped America, where you can't walk anywhere to accomplish anything, and you feel like you're in danger if you ever get on a bicycle, because you just have to like share the road with death machines all day. And then you also, the food is like decent and good, and not like just this nightmare of like, wow, this is how we're able to get to stay and to get this price, and it's the system is not good for us for the most part.
It's not even like, and that's the thing is I imagine there's a lot of people which it is frustrating. It's that the system tends to also work because people don't leave it. And because people don't leave the system, or they end up like traveling internally and spending a lot of time going to other states that just do the same fucking thing, you end up with this like bias that this is normal. This is actually just a normal way to build cities, because everyone does this. But when the moment you travel,
our dumb country.
Yeah, but like the moment you leave our dumb fucking country, you're like, hey, you know what'd be really cool? What if you could just go eat at a different restaurant every like 5 minutes of walking? And you're like, oh, that would be kind of cool, actually. Like, what if there was every type of food you wanted and generally around like at most a 10-minute walk in a city that is like built for you to do that in. So you can just go for a walk and grab something to eat, and it could be a different thing to eat every single day of the week. Like it was so interesting to just like, we would be walking through these streets and Nate would just be like, let's go down that alleyway. I know there's a cafe down there. I'm like, no, what? That's just an alleyway. Like it's tiny and there like barely fits two people walking side by side. And you go down there and there's like a bookstore and a cute cafe and like a bunch of other businesses. And you're like, what the fuck are you all doing in here? How do people come to you? Where do they know about this? There's no like
because it's the
signs.
local thing.
Yeah, but like,
because if
and
you
then we just
actually
go
walk
into
around, because there's reasons to walk around, you would quickly discover what's on your block and like, that's
Yeah.
the place. It doesn't matter what the
And
location
so-
is, it's there.
Yeah, and like we just go into like a cafe, and then the cafe is like half of a building and then half of a greenhouse. Like, oh, okay, just in the middle of the city, there's just this thing, and that's crazy to me that you don't. It's crazy to me that America goes like, actually, no, thank you, I don't want that. I would
Like
much
that
prefer
one thing is cooler than the entire town I live in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like I could go outside and walk for like an hour and I won't find anything even remotely as cool as this tiny little bistro. Like I'm very upset by the prospect. There was like the most upsetting thing I found was we left the castle and we walked like a few minutes or not even a minute, like a minute away from the castle, and directly outside of the castle in a regular old building, like it probably used to be a what's it called, I would imagine it's like a trade post area, was probably what it used to be. In this trade post is like a Starbucks coffee. It's like, god damn it. Like it's that reminder of like, oh cool, they can also just have a Starbucks and it doesn't look like shit. That's nice. Like I appreciate that they can still have history and a Starbucks, and we have to have whatever this weird chic, not fitting into anything else around it looking Starbucks is. Like it's just a nightmare. Everything is just a nightmare compared to a European city. But as I said, it's the other pictures I sent are more regular looking squares. Like that's more of a regular residential area where cars can go in the center, but it's not asphalt, it's stone. So like it's technically it's not a constantly driven over area. You'd find like bikes being more used than like cars, but it is like within walking distance to a bunch of crap. And like just a few minutes away is like more like modern skyscrapers next to really old buildings and hotels. And again, there is a street, but not a lot of cars on it. It's just like so it's possible. There are ways to like intertwine these things. Like if you go, like a 10-15 minute walk from that area, you'll see a road, a normal road with normal cars on it. But you can also have a huge swath of area that cars can get into, but not as frequently, and just a lot of people can walk through it, and it's more cohesive rather than this like the US does one or the other. It's just like you get a choice. You're either going to walk and suffer or drive and suffer. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I'll just drive. It's faster, right? But yeah, it's just it's otherwise it is weird to try. It is weird to think that you can in most European cities you can just see history kind of in a weird wave. Like you'll just see pieces of history from like really, really old all the way to modern in kind of no real order. Like there's no like requirement for it to be in one place or the other. And it can be a little bit stupid. Like for example, in Prague, they're like the new thing that's going on is I think they're like gearing up towards legalizing weed, because there's just every other like shop you walk past is just like a weed shop, and it was obnoxious. Like it's just you would see these like you'd be walking past these nice buildings and it's like, oh, this is really cool, and then you'd see like this giant LED sign in one of the windows and it's like, you can come here and buy weed, and you're like, oh, okay, That's great. And then you do this. It's just the same thing though. Like every other building, it's just come and buy weed in this building. Like this is not Amsterdam, sir. You need to chill out. I don't know what's going on here. This place is out of control. And and it's so many like weed tourist shops and like gift shop stuff. And so it is kind of sad in this way that there are parts of European cities that do just become like dumpster bins for tourism. And I can see how that would be. I would be slightly uninterested in that if I was locally there. Like, it's cool that I can get to a lot of, certain businesses and food places, but it is, I can't imagine it would be also quite annoying to have a chunk of your town being in existence for tourism.
Yeah.
And I think there's a uniqueness about suburban American cities that aren't like that. Like, I don't think my hometown, me and Keith are from, I would not, most people knew because of one shopping complex, but otherwise no one else knew what was in this town. Like, if you asked them like, oh, do you know what's like beyond that shopping complex? And like, I don't know, farms. Like, no one just knows what's back there. And there is something nice about that I don't have to live within the center of a giant tourism hub. But at the same time, it's annoying that you can't have, I guess, your own, because I don't know, it's really much a give or take, right? Like, you have to, a lot of these small cute bistros can exist because tourism is so prevalent, and these shitty parts, these shitty stores that take up that otherwise ruin otherwise really interesting looking buildings or take up space for otherwise much better businesses are because tourism. So it's kind of just duality. But there was a like I said, because Prague was part of the USSR. It was when there are a lot of these really small nuggets that you can find of that still existing, of that era that it was once in. And you can also find, it's like there's these nuggets of, oh yeah, this is definitely, like, I can see that this is part of a communist city planning. Like, this is definitely how you would go about it. It's like efficient, makes sense. It's like compacted, very much like how you would have wanted to make this kind of thing on a budget. And then right next to it is, like, you can see the fall of communism, where it's like overly lavishly Art Deco capitalist looking architecture, and you're like, what's happening here? Also, just weirdly seeing, like, you could just walk into these, I guess they're just hallways. They're hallways that connect one street to the other street. Because obviously these buildings, they just have these like huge, giant, long stretches of buildings, and you need to get across them somehow without going all the fucking way around it. And so they just build tunnels. And so when they built these tunnels, eventually they said, like, why don't we just build businesses in the tunnels that you're walking through? And so you can go in a tunnel to walk through a building to get onto the other side faster. And there's just businesses in that tunnel. And like, that sort of stuff is, I think, that is kind of the stuff I think is a good middle ground for America. I think you can definitely make more of that, where it's, I get that you want to keep the car or whatever, but I think you can make more, because you have a car, right? It doesn't matter if you make really long stretches of buildings, because you can just drive around it fastly. But if you're walking, it would be nice to have like long stretches of buildings that kind of enclose in on themselves almost, and then people walk in the center of those and park on the outside of them, or drive on the outside of them.
All die in Elon Musk's gamer tunnels.
We could.
God, that shit.
The car only single vehicle, but only a specific type of vehicle, RGP gamer death trap tunnels.
It's so stupid. You know what it is? Like, we live in the timeline where, like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is real. And like Judge Doom was successful in destroying all forms of public transportation, like that. I feel like that's the timeline we live in as Americans.
We live in a country that desperately needs better public transit and incentives to use public transit over what we have, and instead a billionaire made what was essentially the antithesis of that entire concept, and just a massive case of waste, and it just happened.
Yeah.
A city
it's
just
like-
let them do
I mean,
that.
it did happen. Look, it happened in Las Vegas, which is the kind of the place you would expect it to happen if it were to happen. It is definitely a place that just you kind of like it. There's a lot
Las
of
Vegas isn't Las Vegas.
You mean as in like it's not actually in the Las Vegas County?
Like the place people think of as Las Vegas isn't Las Vegas.
Yeah, correct. It's not in Las Vegas County. Yeah.
Well, not even that. There's a city called Las Vegas, and the place that people think of is not that, from what I understand. It's
Yeah,
called
the Strip
something else.
isn't in
The
Ve-
entire
Yeah,
the entire
Strip is not in
city
Vegas.
area that people think of is not actually called Las Vegas. Apparently,
That's funny. I'm going
it's
there
just
soon, and I didn't even know that.
just colloquially known as Las Vegas, but Las Vegas is actually like down the road.
That's
Yeah,
It's very strange.
I want to say it's I want to say it's like actually called Paradise. I think that's like I want to say that's what it is. No, is it Paradise? It's like something else. It's some weird name. Like the city of Las Vegas itself is like kind of an obnoxiously dumb, very gerrymandered looking nightmare. And then the parts that you know of are just like sitting outside of it, like just outside of it. And I guess people just accepted that. I don't know. I don't get to plan that stuff, I guess, but I wouldn't plan it that way. It actually looks like a Minecraft map when you look at it from afar. It's actually really great. I appreciate that. There you go. That's what it looks like. Yeah, it just looks like a Minecraft map. Like parts aren't filled in on the map. And you just need it. Someone needs to go down there and walk through those parts of the map and fill them in. But the
the neon.
yeah,
it
no,
looks like the Neon Museum might be in Las Vegas, if I'm reading it right. I've been there.
Neon Museum?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff there. Yeah. Yeah, the I think it also has there's like a dinosaur exhibit in Vegas about, and I think they have I want to say they have something like life-size animatron. No, they have these like life-size dioramas that they build, and then you can go and see them. But yeah, the Neon Museum's there. There's like I think Discovery Kids Museum's there, and that's pretty good. Because we were there we went there in October last year, and that was pretty fun. But yeah, it's traveling is always a fun experience. It's I will say the main thing. I think my biggest thing I hate about traveling is often money. And
Yep.
it's mostly because not in the sense that you need money, but in the sense that money is always different. And I really hate the colorfulness of most European money. I don't like it.
Shots fired.
I think it's cool.
It looks like Monopoly money, and I can't stop thinking that. Like every time I see it, and someone's like handing me things, I'm like, "What? Is this a joke? Am I a joke to you? Where's your money?"
Our currency is so colorless and boring. I mean, it's been getting more colorful with each redesign. You know, like more purples being added onto our bills or whatever. But like, yeah,
it's definitely a whiplash when you're used to all of your money being the same color and the same size. And then you go to a country where each individual dollar is a different size and different color, and it's just. It definitely reminds. It does. I get the Monopoly money comparison because that's definitely what it looks like, but I don't know if our system's better.
I don't think that it's better. Well, okay, so I think that it definitely needs to be better at differentiating itself in a non-visual way. I don't want it to be colored. I want it to be all green. I like it a consistent color. I also like them consistent sizes because or at least consistent. Yeah, I like them consistent sizes because I hate folding money and it's not consistent. It really bothers me when you try folding money and you're like, why is this one bigger? I will break you. Do not do this to me. And it's like it's yeah, I don't like that. Or the other part where it's weird to bend it, like you can bend it, but it doesn't like perfectly bend. It's like this weird kind of like always it's trying to slowly bounce back from the bend, and you're like, don't do that. Like just stay
like
bent.
thicker
I've asked
money.
you. Yeah, like Canada has thicker money, and sometimes it's annoying to like. I have one of those like really small pocket wallets, and so sometimes putting the money in there, I have to like fold it like 2 or 3 times, and it goes like, I don't really want to do that. You can fold me like twice, and otherwise stop. Um, so it's just that stuff is annoying.
You got to get the international version of your ridge.
Yeah, but American money is easy. You can do whatever you want with American money. You can fold it, you can turn it into planes, you can burn it. It's very easy. It's very low effort money. It doesn't, no one thought much about it. And that's kind of nice to some regard. But the also coins, I think everyone's coins are also annoying too. Because it's not as, they don't usually do it as consistently as we did our coins in the way that the sizes are. Like the sizes for American coins are almost very pleasant. Like it's like very big, and then like they kind of just stack on top of each other in a really nice, consistent way. Except for like the dime and the penny, which I don't like. Dime and penny need to be reversed. But otherwise, everything is fine.
Okay, I think we're ready to wrap up when we're giving hyper-specific currency opinions. But anyway, you can find Illusory Wall by searching Illusory Wall on YouTube, and you can get a bunch of Dark Souls videos with very specific answers to very specific questions about Elden Ring and Dark Souls 1 in particular, but a bit of the rest of the series as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite the deep dive. I'm still working through it.
Yeah. I mean, my most recent video was like an hour-long video about Gravelording. So that's always the recurring joke is like, does it really take this long to explain that? It's like, well, not exactly, but if you want to hear all the ins and outs and like all the ramifications of these weird designs, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then especially since you get past you get past the quick answer of what the thing is and how it works, and then you get into the wild esoteric of just like, here's why this is so weird though. Like, why is it like this, and why was it implemented in this way specifically? And the fact that they can keep doing videos like that for the same game for this long is like, it really speaks to just how odd Dark Souls 1 is. Also, absolutely. See if you can spot the joke that made it into the video from me.
Yeah. I've been appearance in my most recent video. Yep.
Been infiltrating Illusory Wall's most recent videos.
Right on.
There's a joke. There's a joke from me in the most recent video, and then the previous video there's a joke at me.
Oh yeah, I already forgot about that one. Yeah, that was great.
But anyway, thanks for watching like always, guys, and thanks for coming, Illusory Wall.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
And we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Okay, bye.